Chapter 162. Holding her wrist, he turned around and led her away step by step. Your Highness, please take care. Luo Yun's voice was choked with sobs as she knelt down behind him. Chu Qingyan did not turn around. She was afraid that if she did, she would not be able to resist the urge to rush up and push open the door. She would fiercely ask the person inside if she was still her mother. Her wrist slipped out of his slender fingers and turned to hold his hand. She knew that words at this time would have no effect on the big ice cube. She chose to use silent companionship to dispel the haze in his heart. 9 years ago, this king left the palace to gain experience. The doors of Chaoyang Palace were also tightly closed. 7 years ago, I left the palace to fight. 5 years ago, 3 years ago, Imperial Mother did not want to see me. In her eyes, only by gaining Imperial Father's favor and making contributions to the court can one stand firm. However, this king was not willing. The capital is too suffocating. Step by step, he slowly walked, but his heart was covered with dark clouds, making it hard for him to breathe. He didn't know if it was because the hand in his palm was too warm or because the person accompanying him made him feel at ease, but he suddenly had the urge to talk. Chu Qingyan did not think that he would suddenly open his mouth, but when she heard him slowly talk about his matters, his tone as if it was not important, her eyes slowly became warm and wet. I don't think there's anything wrong with gaining experience and fighting. Read 10,000 books and travel 10,000 li. If you don't go out and see things, when you encounter something in the future, you will only use military force on paper. Moreover, a man who makes contributions is always more attractive than those who scrupulously abide by their duties, right? She tried to use a playful tone to say these words, trying to cheer him up. Xiao Su faintly smiled when he heard this, but the darkness in his eyes did not dissipate for a long time. Chu Qingyan saw this and her heart hurt a little. But she didn't know how to comfort him. After all, the knot in his heart for nearly 20 years was not something that could be untied in a day. It was like a disease, but she was not afraid to spend time to help him untie it and dispel the coldness in his heart, because what she did not lack the most right now was time. Big Ice Cube, I don't plan on buying anything. When the time comes, I'll list everything on a piece of paper and have steward buy it for me. She felt that the big ice cube right now was not suitable for the bustling streets. The loneliness in his heart and the bustling streets would create a sharp contrast. Xiao Su did not ask why she suddenly changed her mind. He just nodded and brought her into the carriage. Big Ice Cube, to mine, where do we go? Sitting in the carriage, Chu Qingyan, trying her best to find a topic to distract him. Xiao Su only smiled at her insistence on calling this trip a mining trip. Suddenly, he was in the mood to explain these things to her, as a way to prepare her mentally. Our current location is in the southeast of Xixian, and the Fuli Mountains are in the northwest. Therefore, we have to pass through the entire Xixian country to reach it. We have to pass through the Jiangzhou region, the Jiangnan River, the Mali River, the low-lying basin, the Fujing Mountains, the Huteng Desert, and finally pass through the Qingling Forest to reach the Fuli Mountains. Cross Sichuan. Water, basin, mountain, desert, and forest. Chu Qingyan's face was full of black lines. It seemed that this trip was really long. So she began to carefully think about what to bring. Where there is water, we should bring enough rain gear because it is easy to encounter rainy days. In the desert, we should pay attention to the situation where there is no water. We must bring a water bottle. In the forest, there are many mosquitoes, snakes, and ants. Mosquito nets and herbs are indispensable. Xiao Su leaned on the soft couch and saw the person beside him counting with her fingers. He could not help but laugh and shake his head. But the little fellow was still beyond his expectations. She was not frightened by the facts he said. Instead, she began to think about what to prepare next. Along the way, listening to the little fellow's nagging, Xiao Su suddenly felt that when he was alone, he did not feel lonely. But now when two people were together, he felt that it was good to be lively. At this time, the little fellow raised her head and asked with some confusion, "If we don't see any villages or shops on the road, should we prepare some dry food? Xiao Su heard and nodded. Usually, we prepare some dry steamed buns, sesame seed cakes, and the like. Chu Qingyan could not help but shake her head. Dry steamed buns, sesame seed cakes, and the like were vegetarian. She had to think about what could be light enough to carry and eat to fill the stomach. Chu Qingyan thought, and had already returned to the King of England's residence. As soon as she entered the residence, she saw her father squatting on the ground and counting ants. "Father, why are you here?" She originally thought that she would have to go to the Chu residence, but she did not expect that her father had already appeared in the King of England's residence. Chu Qingyan's heart surged with joy. Hearing the sound, Father Chu jumped up and waved his hand at the two people, then quickly went over. Chu Qingyan originally thought that her father was looking for her, but unexpectedly, her father quickly passed by her and walked in front of the big ice block. He stroked his beard and said, "Son-in-law, I heard that you are going on a long journey. The journey is long, you have to pay attention to your own safety." Chu Qingyan suddenly felt a gust of cold wind pass by her side. "Don't be like this, okay? Father, can you take a good look at who is your real daughter?" Father Chu did not notice his daughter's hurt expression at all and continued to ask her all sorts of questions in high spirits. For example, remember to bring a quilt, remember to bring good food when it is cold at night, remember to bring money when you are hungry on the road, remember to bring money to buy things. In any case, it was all very miscellaneous things. But she did not know why, but she felt very warm as she listened to him. Xiao Su, who was supposed to be impatient, didn't know when, but he started to listen to Father Chu's long-winded and nonsensical words. He didn't feel annoyed at all. Perhaps he had never experienced familial affection, but at this moment, it was slowly flowing by his side. "Father, you not only have the big ice block, you also have a daughter, okay? Don't forget your daughter when you have a son-in-law, okay?" Chu Qingyan pretended to be jealous as she held her father's hand and muttered unhappily. When Father Chu heard this, he glared at her as if he did not have the leisure to pay attention to her. "Kai, you are so stupid. You are together with the big ice block. If he takes good care of himself, isn't that the same as taking good care of you? All right, you are already an adult, what are you getting jealous for?" Chu Qingyan felt that her father's fallacious reasoning was somewhat reasonable, but it could not hide the fact that he was very biased. However, she could clearly feel that the coldness from the depths of the palace was slowly dissipating from the big ice block. This was good too. "Your Highness, Kai, Yuan Lang, you are back." Mother Chu came out of the courtyard and greeted the three with a smile when she saw them. The wind after autumn was a little cold, but the air that lingered between the four of them seemed to carry the warmth of a spring breeze. She did not know if there would be a chance in the future, but she would remember this moment. Xiao Su frowned, his heart filled with endless disappointment. Chapter 163. Your Highness, this concubine went to the temple to ask for these 2 amulets for you. They've already been consecrated and will protect you on your journey. After eating together, Chu Mu's mother took out 2 red amulets and said to Xiao Su with some hesitation. After all, she had asked for them on her own initiative. Xiao Su was the prince of a country, and his status wasn't ordinary. She was worried that he wouldn't accept them. "Thank you, Madam Chu." Xiao Su took them without hesitation and put them in his sleeve. Even Chu Qingyan, who understood him well, couldn't help but be stunned by his smooth movements. The Emperor Emeritus bit his chopsticks and looked at this scene in disbelief. Why did his grandson, who had never accepted benefits from others, suddenly have such a change in temperament? Chu Mu's mother also didn't expect this, but when she saw that one of the amulets in her hand was gone, she couldn't help but feel relieved. His Royal Highness wasn't as unreasonable as the rumors said. Chu Qingyan saw that her mother was stunned in place and couldn't help but reach out to take the other amulet from her. She smiled and said, "Mother, you're so nice. I was just lacking one. In the future, when I see an amulet on the road, I'll think of father and mother. I also have a parting gift for you, I also have one." Chu Mu's father impatiently took out 2 small knives that had been sharpened and handed them to the 2 of them as if he was asking for praise. Look, this is a dagger. I learned it from Blockhead and put a lot of effort into it. You can put it on your body to protect yourself. Chu Qingyan clicked her tongue. The blades looked so sharp, she didn't know how father hid them on his body. She was about to reach out to take them, but a pair of hands beat her to it. She looked suspiciously at Big Ice Cube putting the daggers in his sleeve. Could it be that he wanted to help her keep them? Xiaosu thought to himself. The blades were so sharp, it was better to let Mu Ling make 2 scabbards that fit. Otherwise, with the little fellow's careless temperament, it might hurt him. The Emperor Emeritus almost bit his chopsticks in half. When did his grandson accept gifts so readily? He was practically blinded. But in his heart, he felt that this was a good thing. At the very least, those who were previously unreachable and floating in the air had now fallen into the mortal world. They were slowly experiencing the mortal world and were no longer so distant. However, the Emperor Emeritus still felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. How could these 2 outsiders be more diligent than him, their biological grandfather? However, to be honest, he really didn't prepare anything good, so he could only say dryly, well, Yen, when you set off the day after tomorrow, remember to call me. What for? Xiaosu raised his eyebrows and asked. I'm going the same way as you. Let's go together. The retired emperor coughed lightly. He couldn't just say that he was hitching a ride. Xiaosu looked at him with understanding, but he didn't say anything, which meant that he agreed. Chu Qingyan scratched her head in confusion. Didn't retired emperor say that he was going to visit his friends in the West? Why is it on the way again? She saw the Emperor Emeritus put down his bowl and chopsticks. Before he left, he instructed, Yen, prepare more pastries in the next 2 days and bring them along. Chu Qingyan blushed with shame. It turned out that the Emperor Emeritus wasn't going the same way, but had taken a fancy to the pastries she made. After the meal, Chu Qingyan took her parents downstairs, while Xiaosu slowly walked to the door of the study. At this time, there was already someone waiting there. Ethereal, who was dressed in white, was dressed casually. What's the matter? Xiaosu's mood was relaxed at this time, and his voice also carried a trace of elegance. Ethereal was slightly surprised. Every time he left the capital, His Highness's mood was always very low. Why was it different this time? However, this kind of change was always good. He bowed slightly and said, Lord, this subordinate has already found out that my junior sister has been moving around the Jiangxia region in recent years. Although her whereabouts aren't very clear, at least we can lock onto a small area. We don't have to search blindly like in the past. Xiaosu nodded. You can leave this matter to Water Spirit. When we find her, we can have her bring her to the capital to treat First Master Chu's illness. Ethereal shook his head, his face carrying a trace of reluctance. Lord, I'm afraid this won't work. Why? Xiaosu couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. This subordinate of his had been by his side for many years, and his behavior had always been careless. He had never shown a difficult expression on a matter, so he couldn't help but be curious. He wasn't a cold-hearted master. Although he didn't ask about his subordinate's private affairs, it didn't mean that he didn't care. Seeing that his lord had already asked, Ethereal smiled embarrassedly. This subordinate and my junior sister have some misunderstandings. This misunderstanding hasn't been resolved for many years. In addition, because of this subordinate, she has a deep misunderstanding of the Sichuan royal family. If she knew that you sent someone to treat her illness, she would definitely close the door and refuse to accept. Xiaosu understood something. It seemed that he and that junior sister had a deep relationship. This time, we'll pass by the Jiangxia region on our mining trip, so this subordinate wants to take this opportunity to visit her in person. I hope that she will agree to treat me for my sake. If she can resolve the misunderstanding from back then, that would be even better. Ethereal slowly expressed his thoughts. In fact, he wasn't confident in his heart. His junior sister had been drifting around the world for many years to avoid him. This time, if there was an opportunity, he would personally pay her a visit. Xiao Su remembered that 10 years ago, he was the one who sent Ethereal to study medicine under divine Dr. Luo. It wasn't until 6 years ago that Ethereal returned to his side after completing his studies. He wasn't very clear about what happened in those 4 years. Ethereal also kept his mouth shut. He felt that in those few years, Ethereal had matured from being young and inexperienced to being able to take charge of things on his own. It was just that he was more indifferent to everything around him than before. All right. He had always trusted his subordinates. Without asking for the reason, he agreed. Ethereal was a little touched. Actually, his master could directly send someone to forcefully invite him back to the capital. However, his master didn't do so. Instead, he chose the worst method for his sake. At this moment, Ethereal saw the young princess Consort walking over from the corner. He bowed slightly towards her before bidding farewell to his master. This subordinate will go and prepare the medicine for the trip. Xiao Su nodded. At the same time, Chu Qingyan's voice sounded. Big Ice Cube, I've been looking for you for a long time. So you're here. Xiao Su turned around and looked at the person who was like a butterfly jumping in the sunlight. He asked softly, what's the matter? I want to send father and mother back to the Chu residence. Although Steward Bai has already started to select the courtyard and arrange for manpower, I'm worried that if we're not there, something will happen to the Chu residence. So I want to personally make a trip. Chu Qingyan scratched her head in annoyance. As the saying goes, the mountain is high and the emperor is far away. If they leave, it will take a long time before they can return. So she must solve this hidden danger of the Chu family. And, Ben Wang will accompany you. Xiao Su casually said. What? Chu Qingyan felt that she heard wrongly. Why are you still standing there in a daze? Let's go. Xiao Su had already started walking towards the courtyard. Chu Qingyan raised her head to look at the sky. The sun didn't rise from the west today. Hey, Big Ice Cube, slow down. Wait for me. Chapter 164. Although she didn't understand why Big Ice Block would suddenly want to go to the Chu Manor with them, Chu Qingyan didn't ask too much about it. Otherwise, Big Ice Block finally wanted to relax. If he went back on his word after being asked, wouldn't that be a loss? Once Big Ice Block left, Gu Rong and Gu Yi also followed. She remembered that when she first saw Big Ice Block in the Chu Manor, he was accompanied by these two twins. At that time, she couldn't tell which one was which, but now she could. The smiling face was Hu Rong, while the gloomy face was Gu Yi. Although the two of them weren't very satisfied with her at that time, because of Big Ice Block's intentional or unintentional protection of her and Hu Ling and the others' special treatment of her, Gu Rong and Gu Yi didn't reject her as obviously as before. However, they also didn't get close to her. At most, they would greet her when they met and didn't say anything else. After all, the two of them had been beaten because of her, so it was normal for them to dislike her. She didn't need to try to change other people's opinion of her. After all, some things were innate. If others didn't like her, she couldn't do anything about it. Because they were about to leave, and their parents wouldn't come out to send them off tomorrow, it would be a long time before they could see each other again. So Chu Qingyan and her parents rode in the same carriage, while Xiao Su rode in his own carriage. The Chu Manor and the King of England's manor were separated by some distance. By the time they arrived, an hour had already passed. Father Chu and Mother Chu got out of the carriage first, and Chu Qingyan landed after them. She looked up at the Chu Manor's gate. Because she was granted a marriage, the Sichuan Emperor rewarded the Chu family with a lot of money. The Chu family pocketed all the money and couldn't wait to renovate the Chu Manor. By the time they came back, the money had already been spent. So this Chu Manor could be said to have a golden exterior and a rotten interior. On the surface, it looked magnificent, but the inside had already been hollowed out. The two manservants who were originally standing by the door turned a blind eye to the person who alighted from the carriage. Suddenly, they saw Chu Qingyan alighting from the carriage. Their arrogant faces disappeared and they immediately bowed politely. Ninth young lady Chu has returned to the Fu. Your presence brings light to our humble dwelling. Chu Qingyan sighed. What a classic example of a monk. At this moment, Xiaosu also got down from the carriage and slowly walked over. The manservant had never seen him before, but when he saw him get down from the carriage of the King of England's mansion with a mask on his face, a chill ran down his spine and he knelt down with a plop. His Royal Highness, Chu Qingyan shrugged her shoulders at Xiaosu. It seemed that his reputation was still the best. Xiaosu disapprovingly took the lead and stepped into the mansion. Chu Qingyan followed closely behind with her parents. When Old Master Chu and the others learned that His Royal Highness had arrived, they immediately gathered everyone to wait in the front courtyard. When Chu Qingyan stepped into the courtyard, she was shocked by the people in the courtyard. Apart from Old Master Chu's birthday, she had never seen such a neat family again. His Royal Highness has graced us with his presence. Please take a seat. Old Master Chu's wrinkled face was about to burst into a smile. The others immediately stepped forward to chime in. Chu Qingyan pursed her lips. In the modern world, everything depended on one's appearance. Now that they were in ancient times, everything depended on one's power. If it were her parents who came back, these people's attitudes would probably be disdainful. Xiaosu did not decline and sat down in the main seat. Chu Qingyan walked to his side and stood upright. She wanted to see what the big ice cube's purpose was. Otherwise, with his personality that did not like to socialize, he would not have such a reaction. The seats were arranged according to the order of seniority. Old Master Chu and Old Madam Chu, her parents, second Old Master Chu and his wife, third Old Master Chu and his wife, fourth Old Master Chu and his wife, and on the other side were Chu Dekhang and a few other youths. May I know why His Royal Highness has suddenly graced us with his presence? Madame Xing was a shrewd person, and she was also good at social interactions. After the servant girls served tea, she covered her mouth with a handkerchief and giggled. As soon as Madame Xing finished speaking, everyone's gazes seemed to focus on the person in the main seat. The King of England's reputation for ruthlessness was well known, and no one dared to stare at him so openly. Moreover, the masked King of England inexplicably made people feel that he was somewhat ferocious. The youths did not even dare to raise their heads. Chu Qingyan saw everyone's reaction and only felt that it was a little ridiculous. She did not need to explain her family's big ice cube's good points to unimportant people. Qingyan, about the matter of your parents' migration, you say it. Xiaosu only said this one sentence and leaned back in his chair, as if he was handing over everything to her. When everyone heard this, they were somewhat puzzled and could only turn their gazes to Chu Qingyan. Chu Qingyan was stunned, but she quickly took over the topic. Granduncle, aunts, uncles, aunts, I am indebted to everyone for taking care of my parents over the past few days. Now that Qingyan has found a place for my parents to settle down, there is no need to disturb the residents in the future. When old Madame Chu heard this, she was unhappy. With the eldest son and eldest daughter-in-law of the Chu family in the residence, even if Xiaosu was not favored now, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. They could still get some benefits. If the two of them moved away now, wouldn't they lose too many trees for nothing? Ever since Xiaosu and the Chu family became in-laws, those high-ranking officials and nobles had sent many gifts to the Chu family. In fact, it was to establish a good relationship with them, and their Chu family was also prestigious outside. After all, they had a granddaughter and a niece who was a princess consort of the royal family. Even if they committed a crime, outsiders would still give them some face. Therefore, the Chu family took advantage of this relationship. Although they did not deprive father and mother Chu of food and clothing, it was not considered good. Thus, old Madame Chu pretended to be surprised and said, "Are you dissatisfied with the Chu family's lack of food and clothing, so you want to set up another residence?" When old Madame Chu said this, everyone looked over with disapproving gazes. And Madame Xing also asked Father and Mother Chu hypocritically, are our Chu family not treating eldest brother and sister-in-law well? If there is anything that is not considerate, I hope that eldest brother and sister-in-law can point it out. We will definitely correct it. These words were said with extreme grievance, as if it was her parents who were picky and made them compromise. And Madame Wang also nodded and said, eldest brother and sister-in-law, if you have something to say, just say it. We are all one family, there is no need to be so polite. Those who spoke were all women, and those men did not interrupt and just watched from the sidelines. In any case, there was nothing that could not be done with these women speaking. Chu Qingyan saw through their tricks at a glance. She couldn't help but snort coldly. These people's skin was thicker than the city walls. They were wearing the most popular clothes on the market, while her parents' clothes were not new. They really had the nerve to say that. Say what you want to say. This prince is here. Suddenly, such a sentence came from the side. Chu Qingyan suddenly realized that the big ice cube was here to support her. Fine. Who's afraid of a fox exploiting the tiger's might? Chapter 165. Aunt, as well as the other aunts, Qingyan doesn't have any other intentions. I just feel that my parents like peace and quiet, and the Chu family has too many mouths, so it's inevitable that they'll feel uncomfortable. That's why I had the idea of moving out. Chu Qingyan said bluntly. She had already seen their attitude towards her parents just now. Other than the food and accommodation, it was really annoying in other aspects. Too many mouths. Qingyan, what do you mean by that? Are you implying that we're harsh on your parents? Madame Wang couldn't hold back and said in a rather unhappy tone. Qingyan didn't mean that. Chu Qingyan was too lazy to argue with her. Chu Qingyan stood naturally and gracefully in the hall, elegant and beautiful, like a flower that was about to bloom. The several young ladies present suddenly discovered that in just a few months, Chu Qingyan had become more and more like water spirit, and she had also grown taller. Compared to when she first came to the capital, she was simply too different. The few young ladies began to feel jealous in their hearts, but on second thought, Xiao Su was just a wasted prince who was no longer useful, so their hearts immediately calmed down. In fact, people's jealousy was like this. When envious of someone, they would speculate on the dark side of selfishness, and then inexplicably make a lot of bad conjectures, and then their heart would be satisfied. Look, you're just as so. Confucius said, the old one is the old one, the old one is the old one, the young one is the young one. Ninth sister, you have to treat your elders like a junior, otherwise you will be criticized. The bookworm Chu Qunan stood up and lectured her with the attitude of an elder brother. Confucius also said, don't do to others what you don't want done to you. You have fish and meat, but my parents are like tofu in soup. I don't know where your so-called kindness to my parents comes from. Chu Qingyan didn't care about falling out with them. In any case, the big ice cube had spoken, so she didn't mind falling out with them. Confucius said, Chu Qunan continued to talk about Kong Ziyun, but Chu Qingyan had already impatiently interrupted him. Don't always talk about Confucius. He doesn't have so much time to care so much about your trivial matters. You'd better read your books honestly. Don't always shake your head, otherwise you'll really become a pedantic bookworm. Chu Qingyan hated the most that he always looked like a saint, opening and closing his mouth saying that Confucius was righteous and Meng was righteous and self-righteous. He had always been the pride of the family, but he was taught a lesson by his sister who was several years younger than him. Chu Qunan was so angry that his face turned red. However, he, who boasted of his good manners, couldn't curse like a woman in the street. He could only say angrily, Confucius said that only women and villains are difficult to raise. Same here. Don't forget, the one who gave birth to you and raised you was also a woman. Chu Qingyan retorted effortlessly. Chu Qunan was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. He flung his sleeves and sat down. Seeing her son being scolded so harshly, Madame Wang saw out of the corner of her eye that Madame Xing was secretly laughing. She felt uncomfortable and stood up, saying to Xiao Su with an aggrieved expression, "His Royal Highness, look at Qingyan's young age, but her temper is quite bad. Today, she dared to disobey her elders and elder brother in front of you. If this continues, who knows what will happen in the future?" She was implying that if she dared to act so recklessly today, she would dare to expose the roof tomorrow and scold her. Madame Xing thought that her sowing discord would work, but she was wrong. If it weren't for Chu Qingyan's face, Xiao Su wouldn't even take a step into the Chu estate. Now, it was even more impossible for Xiao Su to scold Chu Qingyan. Does Madame Xing have a problem with this prince's pampering? Xiao Su said indifferently, not even giving her a glance. Madame Xing choked and didn't know what to say. Her face had already turned red. Only then did the rest of the people realize that Chu Qingyan already had His Royal Highness as her backing. If they relied on Chu Qingyan, wouldn't it be the same as leaning against a big tree to enjoy the shade? Just as this thought formed in their minds, Chu Qingyan spoke. "Since no one has any problem with this, then this matter is settled." Matriarch Chu immediately tried to stop her. Her usually sharp and unkind face was now trying her best to pretend to be kind and amiable. However, because she always kept a straight face, when she smiled, it was 30% ferocious and 60% frightening. Not only Chu Qingyan, but everyone else also could not bear to watch and turned their faces away. Ninth girl, don't treat Aunt as an outsider. We're all one family, so why should we live the lives of two families? If you're worried that your parents will be wronged, Aunt can promise you that as long as Aunt is here, I won't let your parents be bullied. Chu Qingyan sneered in her heart. If it weren't for you, the mistress of the household, leading the way, how could father and mother be in such a situation in the Chu family? Thank you, Auntie, for your kind intentions. Qingyan thanks you. Chu Qingyan's face was still filled with rejection. Chu Jiming stood up angrily, but he didn't dare to point at Chu Qingyan. He turned to Father Chu and said angrily, "Eldest brother, don't be ungrateful. If it weren't for the Chu family, would you have the status you have today? Raising rats to bite a cloth bag, it's talking about people like you." Father Chu looked at him strangely. "I didn't see you raising rats, and Xiaohua didn't bite your rats either." Chu Jiming was a little regretful. He shouldn't have picked on the soft persimmon. Instead, he was splashed with juice. However, Chu Qingyan had already been angered. She would never let off those who bullied her parents. Since they had already made it so clear, she didn't want to give them any face. "Second Uncle Tang, you've misunderstood. If it weren't for my father's heroic deeds, would the Chu family have this mansion to shelter them from the wind and rain? 10 years ago, you chased my parents out of the Chu family without any explanation. Have you ever thought about how to write the words repay kindness with enmity? During this period of time, when I entered the prince's mansion, you received many congratulatory gifts. You secretly embezzled them into the treasury and didn't treat my parents well. If it weren't for my financial support, what would they be like now? Have you ever thought about how to write the words repay kindness with enmity?" Chu Qingyan spoke unhurriedly, pausing between each word. Her gaze swept over the people present. They didn't dare to raise their heads to meet those clear eyes. The Chu patriarch and his wife were so angry that their faces flushed red, but they couldn't say a word. After all, what she said was the truth. However, they weren't ashamed. They felt that Chu Qingyan had a sharp tongue and couldn't be used by them anymore. They were annoyed in their hearts. After coldly watching the little fellow fight with this outrageous family, Xiao Su stood up with satisfaction. He then said to Gu Rong and Gu Yi, "There's no time like the present. Let's move out today." The matter of moving out was settled. The Chu family didn't dare to say another word. Xiao Su swept his gaze over the people present and said coldly, "This prince doesn't want anyone to disturb this prince's father-in-law and mother-in-law in the future, so," his gaze was slightly suppressed. Everyone bowed their heads and didn't dare to breathe loudly. Chu Qingyan didn't pay attention to the words father-in-law and mother-in-law. She was overjoyed. The big ice cube's aura on the battlefield wasn't just for show. Only Father Chu's eyes flashed slightly. Chapter 166. Leaving the Chu manor, Chu Qingyan thought of those people holding back their anger and not daring to say anything. Her heart filled with joy. Big ice block, you were so handsome just now. Chu Qingyan praised from the bottom of her heart. Xiao Su's expression was calm, but he was feeling a bit proud inside. Ever since he found out that she was not referring to the highest-ranking commander in the army when she said handsome, but rather describing how handsome he was very happy to hear her describe him like this. If you want the Chu family to return your residence, this king will give it to Hualing. Xiao Su looked at her sparkling eyes and said in a low voice with a bit of gentleness. Unexpectedly, she shook her head. Right now you're in the eye of the storm and you're about to go on a long journey. I don't want you to be misunderstood because of this matter. If those people hiding in the shadows maliciously slander you for using your power to steal someone else's residence, I'm afraid those people who don't know the truth will misunderstand you again. This was something she did not want to see. This was also the reason why she had not made a move against the Chu family yet. It was because her current identity was the future King of England's Princess Consort. Every action represented the attitude of the big ice block, so if she insisted on seeking justice, she was afraid that the big ice block would be unjust. She was not willing to do this. She wanted to wait until the time was right to take it all back bit by bit. Xiao Su never thought that she was worried about him. In the cold imperial family, it had been a long time since he had been cherished by someone. His heart softened and he asked in a gentle voice, "You don't need to worry about this king. You just need to follow your heart and answer this king. Are you willing in your heart? Being taken over by others, being chased out of your home, being forced out of your home for 10 years, suffering so much. Are you willing to let them get away with it and enjoy everything that should have belonged to you?" As long as she shook her head, he would take it all back for her. He had never cared about other people's misunderstandings and evaluations of him. He had never lived in other people's eyes. Chu Qingyan was a bit stunned hearing this. The big ice block's tone was so gentle. If he could be like this normally, how good would that be? She was afraid that she would drown in this gentle village. However, thinking about it was just thinking about it. She still seriously considered his question, and then smiled confidently and said, "When heaven is about to give a great responsibility to a man, it will definitely make his mind bitter, his body tired, his body empty, and his actions disrupted. Therefore, I believe that there is a reason for all these things that I have encountered, and I have never complained. As for the unforgivable things those people have done to us, I will not let them go. However, I want to take back what belongs to us with my own hands. Revenge is a dish best served cold." When she was strong enough and didn't need to borrow anyone's strength, she would personally take revenge for all the suffering she had suffered back then. Xiao Su looked at the resolute expression on the little fellow's face and his eyes flashing with confidence. Suddenly, a wave of gratification surged in his heart. All right. He was waiting for her to break out of her cocoon and be reborn. No one could only rely on one person for their entire life. Only when one became indestructible could they protect themselves and the people they cared about. Although Gu Rong and Gu Yi weren't likable, they were very efficient. In a few moments, they had already moved everything onto the carriage. Chu Feng's parents followed behind them out of the Chu family's gate. Chu Feng's father ran over with a big black cat in his arms. Inverted spring onion, Kai Kai, this is a friend that Daddy adopted a few days ago. It's called Xiaohua. Chu Feng's father raised the big black cat's front paw and waved it at the two. Come, Xiaohua, say hello to inverted spring onion and Kai Kai. The big black cat seemed to be very cold and didn't even want to look at them. Chu Feng's father was so angry that he stomped his feet. Only Xiao Su and Chu Qingyan felt a group of crows fly over their heads. Seeing that the big black cat wasn't cooperating, Chu Feng's father could only give up. At this moment, Chu Qingyan ran over to help her mother pack up. Chu Feng's father stood beside his son-in-law with the big black cat in his arms and suddenly spoke. Inverted spring onion, just now you admitted that I'm your father-in-law in front of everyone. Then you should learn from Kai Kai and call me daddy. Chu Feng's father widened his eyes, his face full of anticipation. You heard wrong. Xiao Su's expression didn't change as he said. Chu Feng's father frowned. That's impossible. Firstly, he wasn't old, and secondly, he wasn't deaf. How could he have heard wrong? But looking at inverted spring onion's expression, it didn't seem like he was lying. So did he hear wrong? Chu Feng's father was conflicted, and Xiao Su smiled faintly when he saw him. However, Chu Feng's father didn't forget the important matter at hand. He said righteously, inverted spring onion, you won't be able to return from this trip. You have to take good care of Kai Kai. She's a little stupid and is easily bullied, so you have to pay more attention to her. Xiao Su raised his brows and looked at the little fellow beside the carriage. He didn't comment on Chu Feng's father's words. She was probably the only one bullying others on this trip. When the group separated, Chu Feng's father reluctantly raised the big black cat's front paw and waved it at the two of them. Chu Qingyan's eyes couldn't help but redden. Xiao Su raised a hand and patted her head. This prince promises you that he'll definitely bring you back safely. Whether dead or alive, he would protect her and bring her back safely. Chu Qingyan was still immersed in the sadness of parting and didn't notice the strangeness in his words. Why did he say, bring you back safely, instead of, bring you back safely? All right. She nodded. At the other end of the road. Dan Nyang, why do you think it's so difficult to hear my son-in-law call me daddy? Chu Feng's father was very vexed. Chu Feng's mother laughed. You miss it so much. It'll come one day. Chu Feng's father immediately perked up. When? His Highness and Kai Kai's wedding. Chu Feng's mother pursed her lips and smiled. Chu Feng's father immediately counted on his fingers. 12 golden hairpins, 13 cardamoms, and 15 hairpins. That's still 5 years away. My hair is going to turn white from waiting. Chu Feng's mother couldn't help but pat the back of her husband's hand when she heard his gloomy tone. She comforted him, time flies. 5 years will pass by quickly. Time flies like an arrow, and the sun and moon fly by. Time always passed by quickly. When Chu Qingyan and Xiao Su returned to the King of England's residence, Xining, who had been waiting for them, walked up and bowed to them. Mistress, the fourth prince is here. He wants to see you. Chu Qingyan was a little surprised. It had been 10 days since the assassination attempt on Xiao Ran, and she hadn't seen him even once. She had wanted to ask someone to pass a message to him before she left to express her feelings for him, but he had unexpectedly come by himself. She looked up at the person beside her and saw Big Ice Cube nod at her. Go ahead. She agreed and followed Xining to the side courtyard. She didn't know why he had chosen the side courtyard instead of the front hall. When she arrived, she only saw a man in a eunuch's uniform with his back facing her. She couldn't help but feel puzzled when she didn't see Xiao Ran. Just then, the man with his back facing her slowly turned around and called out in a low voice. Qingyan. Chapter 167. Chu Qingyan turned around and softly called out her name. Only then did she clearly see that the person standing in front of her was none other than Xiao Ran, whom she had not seen for more than 10 days. His much thinner appearance was even more handsome. Perhaps it was because of his injuries, his face was pale and his lips were devoid of blood. When Chu Qingyan saw that he had lost a lot of weight, out of concern for her friend, she could not help but grumble, why are you running around when your injuries haven't fully healed? Don't you know how to take care of yourself? That face full of anger and concern that he had not seen in a long time made Xiao Ran's heart fill with warmth. All right, Qingyan, it wasn't easy for me to come out and find you, so don't just scold me. When he finished speaking, he could not help but cover his chest and lightly cough a few times. When Chu Qingyan heard that, she lightly sighed and walked forward to help him to a stone chair at the side to sit down. She raised her head to look around and suspiciously asked, "Where are the people by your side to serve you? Why isn't a single one here?" Xiao Su shook his head. "I snuck out of the palace and did not bring anyone out." When Chu Qingyan heard that, she saw that he was wearing a eunuch's uniform and knew how he managed to sneak out of the palace. She could not help but scold him. "If you wear a eunuch's uniform like this, who would know that you are the high and mighty fourth prince? If something were to happen, with your already injured body, how would you be able to take it?" Hearing her long-winded nagging, Xiao Ran's face revealed a faint joy. When Chu Qingyan saw that he did not regret his rash actions and instead looked happy, she felt that it was a little strange and reached out to push his shoulder. "Hey, did you hurt your brain? Otherwise, how could he suddenly become so silly?" Xiao Ran suddenly smiled, as beautiful as the sun. Even though Chu Qingyan had seen all kinds of handsome men before, she still felt that her eyes were blinded by him. She had always thought that Big Ice Cube was a cool and adorable handsome man, while this Xiao Ran in front of her was an obedient and pure handsome man. Now that she saw him smile, she was even more certain that if this guy was in the modern world, he would probably be a complete young hunk. Just as Chu Qingyan was fantasizing, Xiao Ran looked at her, his smile fading slightly, leaving only a faint ripple at the corner of his mouth. With a serious expression, he slowly said, "Qingyan, I don't think I hurt my brain, but my heart was stolen." What was this guy saying? That assassin stole his heart? Then how could he still be standing here? What kind of joke was this? Seeing that she was fooled by him, Xiao Ran didn't want to explain. He suddenly reached out to hold her hand, his expression becoming serious. "Qingyan, eldest brother is going to Fuli Mountain Range. It's a long and arduous journey, so you should stay in the imperial city. I'll protect you." Xiao Ran's sudden action made her a bit confused. She couldn't help but pull her hand back, hesitantly saying, "Xiao Ran, do you know that your mother and His Highness Mother, your position and His Highness' position are completely opposite? Although it's a bit blunt, but look at the things that have happened recently. Can you still be at ease with your situation? And as His Highness' fiancé, do you think I'll be safe by your side?" The word fiancé pierced his heart deeply. He lowered his brows dejectedly. He had finally found a girl he liked, but she was already his eldest brother's fiancé. Although his eldest brother's existence was like a god in his heart, he still couldn't accept it. He clenched his fists and slowly raised his head. "Qingyan, you're 10 years older than Imperial Brother. His personality is very stuffy. Will you be able to get used to it? If you say you're not used to it, I'll immediately take you away." "I won't, we're fine." Chu Qingyan thought he was asking if she and the Big Ice Cube didn't have anything to talk about. Although there were times when they did, it was good for them to do their own things. Xiao Ran saw that she didn't have any worries and shook his head in his heart. It seemed like she still didn't understand what an engagement meant. Eldest brother had never been close to women and treated Qingyan like his own little brother or sister. So he secretly decided that when he grew up, he would go to Imperial Father and Imperial Mother to have Imperial Father cancel the engagement between eldest brother and Qingyan. Imperial Father loved him so much. As long as he wanted something, he would give it to him. So the only two things he needed to do now were to wait for Qingyan to grow up. At the same time, he needed to become strong. Only then would Imperial Father and Imperial Mother have a reason to agree. Towards Xiao Ran's sudden distraction, Chu Qingyan was a bit confused. She waved her hand in front of his eyes. "Xiao Ran, why are you in a daze? I'll have someone quickly send you back to the palace. Otherwise, the matter of you sneaking out will be quickly discovered. At that time, it won't be so simple. I know I can't stay for too long. Wait a moment." Xiao Ran took out a wooden puppet from his bosom. His fingers clenched tightly, and then he handed it to her. "I carved this a while ago when I was learning how to craft. Originally, I wanted to give it to you as a gift during the Mid-Autumn Festival. Unfortunately, you left too early and I couldn't find a suitable opportunity to give it to you. Then something happened. This time, it'll be a parting gift for you. Since you want to leave, I can't persuade you to stay. It'll be a long journey. If you miss me, you can take it out to sea. Xiao Ran said emotionally. After Chu Qingyan took it, although the carvings on it were a bit rough, it wasn't hard to see that the person on it was her. Her long dress fluttered, and there was a bit of a fairy descending to the mortal world. Chu Qingyan was pleasantly surprised. This was the first time she had received a handmade wooden puppet. She said sincerely, "Thank you." Xiao Ran looked at Chu Qingyan's bright and clear face in front of him, and his eyes gradually deepened. In the end, he reached out and hugged her. Although his voice was still a bit hoarse from his puberty period, it was already sufficiently affectionate. "Qingyan, you said before that all encounters in the world are reunions after a long separation. I look forward to the day we meet again. You have to take care of yourself." Before Chu Qingyan could react to what was going on, the person who had hugged her so tightly had already let go of his hand. With his back to her, he walked away step by step from her line of sight. "Because I'm afraid that if I turn my head, I won't be able to resist the urge to make you stay. Qingyan, wait for me. One day, I will have the power to protect you. Whatever you want, whatever you don't want, I will give it to you." Chu Qingyan held the wooden puppet in her hand and finally came back to her senses. She smiled gently, "Xiao Ran, you take care too. Although the Sichuan emperor and consort, you were the main culprits who had caused Big Ice Cube's tragic childhood, and Xiao Ran's harm to Big Ice Cube was indirect, she still couldn't blame him. He was still too young. In her eyes, he was just a 12 or 13-year-old child. However, because she looked at this child with the mentality of a 20-year-old, she completely didn't expect that this young man in front of her had already developed feelings for her that he shouldn't have. Imperceptibly, it had an unpredictable impact on her future. Chapter 168. As night fell, the King of England's residence welcomed a rare guest. Xiao Yao. With a pot of wine in his left hand and another in his right, he leisurely walked into the prince's residence. Hearing the servant's report, Xiao Su walked out of the room and happened to see his second brother standing under the banyan tree. He raised his hand and shook the wine pot in his hand, saying in a dissolute manner, "With the moon, the wind, and the departure, how can there be no wine to accompany it?" As he spoke, the wine pot in his hand flew towards Xiao Su. Xiao Su had always been in the mood to shake his head and sigh at this straightforward second brother of his, but tonight, he was indeed in the mood to drink. Thus, the two turned and walked towards the pavilion in the middle of the lake. They sat down in the pavilion. Huang Yi had already received the order and quickly prepared 2 or 3 dishes to go with the wine, then left with the servants. Xiao Yao saw that Huang Yi was graceful and witty, so he couldn't help but tease, "Don't blame Imperial Brother Yu for not liking the women that Chindi sent up. It seems that there are beauties in the residence, so you don't like those common women." Xiao Su faintly glanced at him, "Put away your glib tongue, or you can leave immediately." Xiao Yao immediately spread his hands and compromised, "Fine, fine, fine, Chindi is scared of you. You really take my good intentions for ill intent. If I didn't see that you were leaving, I specially came to see you off." "What? You don't even let me speak freely? After so many years, haven't you said enough?" Xiao Su disagreed. Xiao Yao nodded in agreement, "After being a dissolute for so many years, I'm somewhat used to it. Chindi finds that I'm becoming more and more charming." Listening to narcissistic people talking narcissistically, Xiao Su never interjected. "Forget it. You're such a dull and boring person. You won't understand even if I tell you about these romantic matters." Xiao Yao bit open the cork, and the fragrance of the wine immediately overflowed. 20 years of new, Hong, how is it, fragrant?" As he spoke, he helped to fill their cups. Xiao Su picked up the wine glass and took a sip. "Not bad. The color of the wine is pure and the taste is sweet. It is indeed a good wine. Of course, this is what I got from the heavenly fragrance brothel." It's the real deal. Xiao Yao laughed heartily, completely ignoring the fact that others would look down on him because of his description of the brothel. How much longer do you want to stay in Fireworks Wine Alley? Xiao Su slowly looked at him through the clear wine. He was supposed to be a proud son of heaven, but because of his decadence, he was disgraced by others. However, there was no disdain in Xiao Su's expression. It was as if he was just asking a younger brother who had been away from home for many days when he would return home. Xiao Yao's hand, which was holding the wine glass, paused for a moment. Then, he slowly shook the wine glass and chuckled. The night was too dark to see if his smile was sincere or not. It's been 10 years. I've already forgotten what I was like back then. On one side, I was depraved. On the other side, I was clear-headed. I struggled bitterly. It seemed like I was happy, but it also seemed like I was free. In reality, I lived a meaningless life. When he finished speaking, he downed the wine in his cup in one gulp. It was hard to tell whether it was sweet or bitter. As the wine entered his throat, his complex emotions swirled 1,000 times. Xiao Su turned to look at him. Although this was what his second brother said, among the brothers in the imperial family, he lived the most thoroughly. He knew what he wanted and what he didn't want, so he always lived according to his own methods. I'm leaving tomorrow. Imperial father doesn't have many people he can use. Don't you plan on coming back to help Xishuan? Xiao Yao laughed, then raised his eyes and shook his head with a smile. Imperial brother, oh Imperial brother, what should I say? He treats you like this, but you're wholeheartedly thinking of Xishuan. When you left the capital, you shouldn't have come back. Sooner or later, the burden on your shoulders will be as heavy as a mountain and crush you alive. Xiao Su's eyes flashed. In the end, he looked at the wine in his hand that was rippling slightly. As he drank it, a burning sensation immediately spread between his lips and teeth. It reached straight to his heart. Xiao Yao quickly filled his cup and sneered, Imperial brother, I can understand your pain. Everyone is pushing you too hard. One needs you to contribute to the country, but doesn't want your contributions to overshadow your masters. The other needs you to protect your relatives, but restricts you. Fortunately, my mother only wants me to live well. As long as I live well, I don't need to worry about anything else. I'm also filial enough. I've always lived according to her wishes, so I'm carefree and unrestrained. He raised his brows and looked at his imperial brother in front of him. He continued, but what about you? You're filial to her, but she thinks you have ulterior motives and is always on guard against you. You're filial to her, but she's always dissatisfied and wants a yard when given an inch. Imperial brother, why do people have to live so tirelessly? Xiao Su gripped the cup in his hand, but his fingertips were turning white bit by bit. His second brother was right. He was in a dilemma. What he wanted to protect, he couldn't protect. What he wanted to abandon, he couldn't abandon. His life was difficult and powerless. Xiao Yao sighed softly and filled his cup again. In this life, don't ask about the free and unfettered sky. Since ancient times, all things have flowed down the east. Imperial brother, look on the bright side. Alright, after talking so much, why don't I see your little princess? When Xiao Su heard the word, little fellow, the color in his eyes improved a lot. She's organizing the things for tomorrow's trip. TSK, TSK, TSK. I have to say, you've picked up a treasure. Your little princess, in terms of appearance, will definitely be a devastatingly beautiful woman when she grows up. Her temper isn't bad. As long as she's quick-witted, she might be able to help you if you encounter any trouble in the future. Xiao Yao clicked his tongue somewhat enviously. You should also ask Imperial Grandfather to grant you a marriage. In any case, Imperial Grandfather is still in my residence. Xiao Su raised his brows and looked at him. His words were like a smile that wasn't a smile. When Xiao Yao heard this, he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. This proposal wasn't kind at all, okay? He almost forgot that Imperial Grandfather was still in the King of England's residence. he'd better not meet him, so as to avoid catching him and giving him all kinds of education. Ahem, Imperial brother, this younger brother suddenly remembered that there are chores in the residence to deal with. So, I have to prepare to leave. Xiao Ran smiled embarrassedly. He straightened his clothes and stood up. Xiao Su saw through his thoughts, but he didn't expose him. He filled his cup with wine and raised it to toast him. If you want to be yourself, go to Yingchun courtyard and find water spirit. She will arrange it for you. Xiao Yao heard this and sighed softly. Imperial brother, you always think too much for others and too little for yourself. Xiao Su smiled self-deprecatingly, because I'm the eldest brother. The eldest brother was like a father. The responsibilities that his father didn't fulfill, as the eldest brother, he could only take over one by one. Xiao Yao understood his thoughts and finally raised his cup. This cup of wine, Imperial brother, I toast you. If this trip can be safe, this younger brother hopes that you will go as far away as possible and never come back. After Xiao Yao finished speaking, he downed the wine in one gulp. Xiao Su paused for a moment, but in the end, he drank the wine. The wine was rich and mellow, but for some reason, it was as bitter as a medicinal soup, making people unable to bear to frown. Xiao Yao confidently tossed the wine cup aside, then turned his back to his imperial brother and waved his hand. He sang loudly, this trip will not be a good one, dreaming of the mortal world and hiding in the mortal world. Listening to the voice gradually fading away, Xiao Su held the wine cup in his hand and drank cup after cup. Chapter 169. Xiao Su held the wine glass in his hand and looked at the moon and stars in the night sky. Suddenly, he felt that his life was empty. For nearly 20 years, he had scrupulously followed the rules and never stepped out of line. However, no one said to him that he had done a good job. What he got was either scolding or cold eyes. He raised his glass to the wind and moon. The first toast was to God, who allowed him to be born but never showed him the way to go. He drank it in one gulp. The second toast was to the royal family, who gave him a noble status but forgot to add the warmth of family. He drank it in one gulp. The third toast was to himself, who had been at a loss for so many years and still refused to turn back. He drank it in one gulp. The silver moon sprinkled down, as if draping a thin layer of gauze over the person who kept repeating the action of drinking. It was hazy and carried a sense of sadness and loneliness. Every time he drank a cup of wine, his eyes became clearer. The more he drank, the brighter they became. He was like a cheetah hibernating in the night, his eyes eerie. But if someone walked closer to take a look, they would see that his clear eyes were filled with pain. His heart that had been silent for so many years was awakened by his second brother little by little. Those dusty past events that had been buried for a long time were once again uncovered. He had been betrayed, abandoned, and hurt, however, from birth to now, he had never stopped longing for family. The wine jar was empty and the night was dark. His heart sank. The cups and plates were in a mess and the moonlight was scarce. He stood up shakily. At this moment, only the wind and moon could accompany him. Chu Qingyan, who was packing, was a little worried when Xiao Su didn't come back. Didn't they say that the second prince came and they were drinking and chatting happily? Why didn't the big ice block come back when the second prince had left? Thinking about it, she was a little worried. She told Hong Yi and Xining what she was doing and then walked to the pavilion in the middle of the lake with the lanterns prepared by the servants. There were only patrolling guards along the way. Chu Qingyan asked a few servants and learned that the big ice block was still in the pavilion. She immediately quickened her pace. I heard that the second prince brought wine. I wonder if Big Ice Cube can hold his liquor well. Don't fall asleep like this. The autumn night is chilly. It would be bad if you catch a cold. As she thought of this, she became even more worried and her footsteps became even more joyful. However, before she reached the pavilion, she saw the person standing by the pavilion. She heaved a sigh of relief and slowly walked over. Big Ice Cube, it's late. We have to set off tomorrow. It's time to. Before she could finish her words, she saw the person who had turned around upon hearing her voice. His eyes were brighter than the moon in the sky. She couldn't help but stare blankly and forgot what she was going to say. With the center of the lake as the scenery, the person in front of him was in front of him. The autumn wind rushed into his sleeves, and his clothes fluttered. The silver-white mask flashed under the moonlight, and his black brocade robe seemed to blend into the dark night. However, the sparkling waves behind him seemed to have plated him with a layer of sparkling crystal, making him look like a god. Chu Qingyan stared at him in a daze. A thought flashed through her mind. He was clearly someone who could rely on his looks to make a living, but he always used his abilities to prove himself. Her big ice cube was really great. In her daze, she didn't notice that the person standing in front of her was a little dazed. He was a little at a loss, like a newborn child, with a bit of naivety. The little fellow in front of him seemed to be looking at him. Why was she looking at him? In the past, no one dared to look at him so calmly. However, when this little fellow looked at him, he didn't feel any displeasure. Instead, he felt a faint joy. Why? He suddenly didn't know the answer. One question after another drove him to slowly walk towards her. He was clearly a drunk person, but his steps were steadier than anyone else's. When she saw the big ice cube walking towards her, Chu Qingyan came back to her senses and couldn't help but grin. Just as she was about to report to him about the progress of her packing, a sudden breeze blew over, mixed with the faint fragrance of wine. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but frown. At this time, the person had already stood in front of her. She raised her head, but a hand fell down and gently caressed her cheek. Chu Qingyan stood there in a daze. Her bright eyes reflected a pair of beautiful eyes that were equally bright but filled with uncertainty. "Where are you from?" A soft whisper sounded as if it was in a dream. Chu Qingyan suddenly woke up. Was the big ice cube drunk? Her entire body was surrounded by the intoxicating fragrance of wine, as if she was trapped in a wine cellar. She didn't answer, so the person who was caressing her patiently asked again. "I'm from the 21st century. My surname is Chu, my name is Chu Yen." The person in front of her softly muttered her name a few times before his gaze fell back onto her face. His fingers caressed her cheek as he slowly said, "Then will you leave?" What's wrong with the big ice cube? Could it be that the second prince had said something to him? Why did he become so anxious after drinking? But now wasn't the time to care about this. She seriously and solemnly replied, "No, I won't leave." "Then how long will you stay?" "Many people have already left." His clear eyes were filled with a thin layer of mist, making it impossible for people to see what he was thinking. But she could clearly feel the sadness that came from his heart. Her nose suddenly turned sour as she said without hesitation. "Unless you don't want me, we'll live and die together. We won't turn our backs on each other." She couldn't believe the words that came out of her mouth without thinking, but she didn't regret it. "All right." The thin calluses that came from long-term martial arts practice slid across her delicate skin. Then he placed his hand on her slender shoulder and gently pulled her into his embrace. Chu Qingyan was shocked by the big ice cube's sudden action. "What's wrong with the big ice cube?" But she heard him say helplessly in her ear, "It's too tiring to be alone. Lend me your shoulder for a while." Chu Qingyan's eyes turned sour when she heard that. Her hands that were hanging by her sides slowly lifted up and wrapped around his waist. "I know that it's been hard on you for so many years. I wasn't here in the past, but now that I'm here, I won't let you live alone in torment. You and I will taste the sweetness together. You and I will share the bitterness together." The two of them hugged each other under the cool breeze and bright moon, warming each other's hearts. "Little fellow, this prince is sleepy." After saying that, his breathing became even. But this made Chu Qingyan suffer. Such a big person leaned his entire weight on her. Even Chu Qingyan, who called herself a tough woman in the modern era, almost couldn't support it. But she still felt a little moved. She felt a little funny, a little sad, and a little relieved. She was moved. After going through so many things, the big ice cube was still able to maintain his original heart. Only when he was drunk would he unreservedly reveal the weakness in his heart. What was funny was that even though he was tired, he still remembered to tell her that he was sleepy. What was sad was that the big ice cube, who always put himself in other people's shoes, was really lonely. Fortunately, she was the only one who could see this fragile big ice cube. She felt that the distance between the two of them seemed to be one step closer. But Chu Qingyan suddenly patted her face. She clearly didn't drink, but why did she feel her cheeks heat up? Could it be that the wine didn't intoxicate her, but she was intoxicated herself? Beauty didn't intoxicate her, but she was intoxicated herself? Chu Qingyan teased herself and shook her head. Then she half dragged and half carried the big ice cube, resigned to her fate, and walked towards the main courtyard. But the breath that blew against her ear was a little itchy. She felt her ear faintly burning. Just when she was at a loss, she heard a murmur and her whole body trembled. Chapter 170. When those words fell in her ears, Chu Qingyan turned in surprise to look at the person lying on her shoulder. Muhu, I knows that 10 years ago, you already wanted to give up on I. The soft words were filled with a sigh, despair, and loneliness. She seemed to hear the sadness that came from the depths of his heart. Chu Qingyan gritted her teeth and held back the tears that were about to spill out of her eyes. She raised her head to not let them fall. 10 years ago, was it that fire? She opened her mouth, wanting to take this chance to ask what had happened in the past. But those slightly closed eyes that covered all the light, had a serenity that people couldn't bear to disturb. His thin lips were moist. If Big Ice Cube was a woman, people who saw this scene would want to kiss him, but she immediately stopped that thought. What had happened in the past 10 years? These 3 words had already become a knot in Big Ice Cube's heart, and also became her curse. Chu Qingyan secretly made a decision in her heart. She had to find the truth of what had happened in the past. She put one hand on Big Ice Cube's shoulder and the other hand around his waist. She brought him step by step to the main yard. No matter how difficult it is, don't be afraid, I will accompany you. When you are tired, I will lend you my shoulder. When you are cold, I will open my arms for you. Perhaps my shoulder is not broad enough, perhaps my arms are not warm enough, but as long as you need me, I will be there. Although I am not strong, have no power, and don't have great wealth, but what I have, I am willing to give it to you. You are the first person other than father and mother that has been good to me. I, Chu Qingyan, will always remember this. Although the road was not far, Chu Qingyan spent an entire hour to bring the person beside her to the main yard. Hong Yi and Cheng Yi who were waiting at the entrance saw them and were shocked. Then they immediately came forward, one on the left and one on the right, planning to support their lord. Young Princess Consort, you've worked hard. Let us do it. Hong Yi said with a smile. Chu Qingyan felt that this was a good idea. Just as she was about to nod, she felt the person leaning on her tightly hugging her. Her gentle brows suddenly furrowed, as if she was very resistant to human contact. Chu Qingyan saw this and sighed softly. Big Ice Cube didn't like to be touched by others, even when he was drunk. However, this was also good. A self-disciplined man was more reassuring. Chu Qingyan raised her hand to stop Hong Yi and Cheng Yi from approaching. She squeezed out a smile and said, no need. I've already helped him here. It's not a big deal. Hong Yi and Cheng Yi heard this and had to retreat. Hong Yi's face was still worried, but Cheng Yi's face was already sour. The moment she finished speaking, Chu Qingyan felt the hand that was strangling her to the point of suffocation finally relax. Chu Qingyan rejoiced that she had finally understood his intentions. However, she had also suffered a lot in the future. Using all her strength, she finally placed the big ice cube on the bed. Chu Qingyan slumped to the side, almost collapsing. Hong Yi, who had already prepared hot water, brought it over. Cheng Yi went forward to untie her lord's belt and help him undress. When Chu Qingyan saw this, she remembered that Big Ice Cube was always the one who took care of his own clothes. Unless he wanted to tease her, he would ask her to do it herself. She had never seen him being served by anyone before. Hence, Chu Qingyan spoke up. Cheng Yi, you can leave first. I can take care of His Highness here. Cheng Yi's outstretched hands paused and she felt a little embarrassed. She smiled embarrassedly. Little Wang Fei, you must have spent a lot of energy supporting Wang Ya all the way here. Why don't you go back and rest first? This servant and Hong Jiejie have served His Highness for many years. It is only right that we work for His Highness. Chu Qingyan raised an eyebrow. This person mentioned that she was the old person who served Big Ice Cube. She didn't know if it was intentional or not. But from her tone, it was like she was drawing a line between her and Big Ice Cube. It was a little grating. Chu Qingyan curved her lips into a smile. You've worked hard for so many years. But I will have to get used to these things in the future. Right now, I'm just practicing in advance. After saying this, Chu Qingyan didn't wait for her reply and turned to Hong Yi to say, Hong Yi, put down the hot water and towel. Go and work on tomorrow's trip. Cheng Yi was ignored like this. Hong Yi looked at Cheng Yi's sullen face and quickly put down the things. Then she gave Cheng Yi a look to leave with her. Cheng Yi saw that Chu Qingyan had completely ignored her and could only leave unwillingly. But before she left, a trace of calculation flashed through her eyes that no one noticed. Chu Qingyan didn't miss the interaction between the two. She didn't care about this before because she wanted to be a rice worm who didn't care about the outside world. She only wanted to be an otaku to the end. But now, she had to keep her eyes and ears open because this marquee gate was too deep. If she wasn't careful, she would drown this rice worm. Xi Ning happened to be looking for her and found this place. She immediately entered the door. Master, why are you here? Is Lord drunk? N, you came just in time. There's hot water over there. Give me the towel after you need it. I'll help His Highness wipe. Chu Qingyan stepped forward to help Xiao Su slightly pull open his lapel to make him more comfortable. When she turned to instruct Xining, her fingers accidentally touched the skin on his chest. So smooth. Chu Qingyan lowered her head and couldn't help but poke it. It seemed to be very elastic. TSK. As expected, he exercised regularly. Otherwise, how could his body be so strong and curvy? No, she was going to drool. Cough cough, mistress, here's the towel. Xining couldn't help but cover her eyes. This love-struck woman in front of her wasn't her mistress. No. Her charming fantasy was pulled back by Xining's voice. Chu Qingyan hurriedly withdrew her gaze and said, I didn't see anything. Xining cast her a suspicious look. Chu Qingyan gave a soft cough as she took the towel. She didn't look at how good his body was with her love-struck eyes, but seriously helped Big Ice Cube wipe. When the cloth brushed against his neck, Chu Qingyan suddenly felt a sense of déjà vu. It was as if she had done the same thing to someone before, and it had happened before she came to the ancient era. However, she could not recall it at that moment. She quickly cleaned up and pulled the blanket over him as she let out a soft sigh. At this time, Xining had already brought the water out. The room was very quiet with only the two of them. Chu Qingyan leaned against the bed as her eyes fell onto the person on the bed. This was her first time being alone in a room with Big Ice Cube sleeping peacefully, but she had to admit that Big Ice Cube's alcohol tolerance was quite good. Other people would go crazy after drinking, but he would be quiet after getting drunk. The soft candlelight shined on the mask on his face. The silver light shined and made her a bit dazzled. Suddenly, a bold idea flashed in her mind. She immediately sat up and stared at the mask like a tiger watching its prey. The night was dark and the wind was strong, so it was the best time to take off the mask. Chapter 171. It wasn't that she hadn't wondered what a masked face looked like before. She subconsciously felt that the big ice cube's face shouldn't have been disfigured. In her free time in university, she would read a few transmigration novels. Many male protagonists used disfigurement to hide their true faces. She felt that the big ice cube might be the same. She had tried many times to get the big ice cube to take off his mask for her to see, but he would either ignore her or walk away by himself, so she didn't dare to speak again. Now that he was drunk and powerless, if she took the chance to take off his mask and put it back in place, she would be able to solve all her doubts. Wouldn't that be perfect? She licked her lips and slowly reached out her hand. Her heart was beating fast, as if she was unveiling the 18th birthday present her parents had given her. She was curious, expectant, and nervous. When her hand was about to touch the mask, his thick and long eyelashes moved slightly. She thought that he was about to wake up, so she quickly pulled her hand back in shock. But in the end, he was still deeply asleep. So it was a false alarm. Chu Qingyan let out a sigh of relief. Why did she feel a bit guilty? After a while, she reached out her hand again. This time it was very smooth. When her fingers touched the ice-cold mask, the big ice cube didn't react at all. She gave a sly smile and gently used her fingers to pick up the mask. But when the mask slowly left the big ice cube's face, her heart suddenly became confused. So what if she knew or didn't know the big ice cube's true face? If his face was intact and not disfigured, what would she do? If his face was disfigured and changed beyond recognition, what would she do? Was his true face really that important? If his face was intact, the big ice cube must have his reasons for not leaving his mask for 10 years. Why would she break this balance for her own selfish reasons? If his face was disfigured, then what right did she have to pick at his scars? Wasn't that just sprinkling salt on his wounds? Chu Qingyan, Chu Qingyan, when you talk to someone, it has nothing to do with looks, status, or wealth. Didn't you despise people who pry into other people's privacy? Why do you want to be the person you used to hate? She slowly retracted her hand. Her eyes suddenly became bright and clear, no longer clouded over. She had to respect the big ice cube. Unless he was conscious and willing to let her know, she would not do this secretly when he was unconscious. When she made this decision in her heart, she felt carefree all over. The sound of footsteps could be heard. Xining had returned. Master, do you want to rest? Tomorrow, they would leave the capital. This servant is worried that you won't have the energy tomorrow. Xining widened her almond eyes and asked with concern. Chu Qingyan smiled. I'll sit here for a while. The alcohol is surging up, and sometimes it's very uncomfortable. I'll go back to my room after a while. Xining nodded. Master's words are reasonable. Seeing her master staring at the Lord, she felt a little funny. Master, you know, in so many years, this is the first time this servant has seen the Lord drunk. This topic aroused her interest. Could it be that the Lord rarely drank in the past? It's not that he rarely drank, it should be that he almost never touched alcohol. The servants in the Fu have never seen the Lord drunk before. Occasionally, he would come back from the palace banquets with the smell of alcohol, but that wasn't anything. Since her master had gradually gained a firm foothold in the Wangfu, Xining felt that as the most trusted subordinate of her master, it was necessary for her to grasp all kinds of information in the Wangfu. Moreover, it was mainly about the matters surrounding the Wangye, so that when her master needed it, it would come in handy. Now, she could talk about the Wangye's matters and accompany her master to relieve her boredom. Chu Qingyan nodded and turned to look at the person lying peacefully by her side. A trace of pity flashed through her eyes. Why was the person who rarely touched alcohol so drunk today? Was it because he was about to leave the capital and was reluctant? Or was it because of the emotions that had been suppressed for a long time that exploded? Big Ice Cube was a very strict person and was very self-disciplined. For him to have an emotional breakdown, how much pain did he have to endure for him to explode? It was hard for her to imagine. Actually, the straw that broke the camel's back was the straw. This trip to the Fuli mountain range seemed to be more than just mining for the big ice cube. But her knowledge was limited and she couldn't analyze it, so she didn't have any clues right now. Perhaps, she could ask Hualing and the others. It was already late at night and she couldn't hold on any longer. Seeing the big ice cube sleeping deeply, she was relieved and brought Xining back to her room. When the door was closed, the master and servant left. The person hiding in the corner slowly walked out. A trace of pride flashed in her eyes. She had finally waited until Chu Qingyan left. Then after looking around to make sure no one was around, the orange dress slid across the wall as she silently approached Xiao Su's room step by step. Her jade-like fingers touched the door and gently pushed it open. She opened a small gap for a person to pass through and immediately went in. Then she quickly closed the door. Before Chu Qingyan left, she had blown out the candles on the table, so the room was a little dark. But the bright moonlight shone through the window and onto the ground, reflecting a weak light. When the person got used to the light, this little bit of light was enough to see everything in the room. She held her breath and felt that the person in the room had a stable breathing and was fast asleep. Her heart was filled with joy as she slowly walked towards the bed. She came to this room several times a day, so she was familiar with all the decorations. So she easily walked to Xiao Su's bed. The clear light shone on the person on the bed, giving off a sacred and inviolable feeling. His fine long hair was spread out on the bed, forming a sharp contrast with his smooth skin. It was as if there was an aura of abstinence. And those tightly closed eyes had thick and curly long eyelashes that made women envious. She hadn't seen his face, but she was already captivated by his elegance. The person in front of the bed was already mesmerized. If it was any other time, she wouldn't have dared to look at her master with such a bold gaze. Because that would be offending her master. But now, no one knew. And Lord was already asleep, so no one would come to disturb him. She suddenly gave a low and gloomy laugh. Tonight, she would definitely become one of His Highness's people. Otherwise, she didn't know when His Highness would return. If she waited until she was old, she would lose her value. As for imperial concubine Yu, she would probably be nothing more than an abandoned pawn. Originally, she didn't have any hope. But tonight, when Lord was drunk, it gave her a glimmer of hope. In order to survive, in order to obtain glory and wealth, she could only take risks. And the person on the bed was Lord, whom she had admired for a long time. Her desire to take him for herself was as crazy as grass. So, she couldn't wait to reach out to Xiao Su's belt. The moonlight was cold, but it illuminated her greedy eyes. She was Qing Yi. Qing Yi, who believed that wealth came from danger. Chapter 172. Qing Yi held her breath. When her hand was about to touch that black belt, the person lying down suddenly opened his eyes. His sharp gaze was like the scorching sun piercing through the clouds. It was so dazzling that people couldn't help but close their eyes, not daring to meet his gaze. Qing Yi's fingers froze. It was like her pressure points had been pressed and she didn't dare to move. Xiao Su's cold gaze swept over the person who was about to approach him. His finger moved and the brocade quilt on his body flew up. The brocade quilt flew over and before she could react, she felt like her entire body was bound. No matter how she struggled, she couldn't break free. Then a bad premonition floated in her mind. Xiao Su waved his hand and Qing Yi was wrapped up by the brocade quilt that came like a bolt of lightning. Then she flew out. The doors suddenly opened at this time and Qing Yi flew out of the room with the quilt. Before she could cry out, she had already smashed into the ground outside. Xiao Su stood up and brushed the creases on his clothes. Hearing the uncontrollable moans coming from outside, he coldly narrowed his eyes. Touching this kind of person was simply dirtying his hands. When he walked out of the room, Wu Ling was already standing by the door. Master! Qing Yi, who had fallen to the ground, was sobbing in pain. When she heard Wu Ling's salute, she immediately endured the pain and struggled to get up. Trembling, She knelt at the bottom of the steps and explained, "Your Highness, you've misunderstood this servant. This servant didn't mean to disturb your rest. This servant only wanted to go in and see if you were sleeping well. This servant was worried that you would feel uncomfortable in the middle of the night when you were drunk, so." Xiao Su expressionlessly cut her off. "Is that so?" Even though she knew that His Highness was already suspicious, she still didn't let go of the chance to beg for mercy. She quickly nodded, "Your Highness, it's true. This servant isn't lying. This servant can swear to the heavens, the moon is my witness." Xiao Su thought of something the little fellow had once said and couldn't help but throw it back at her. "What makes you think that if you swear on the fickle moon, this prince will believe you?" Cheng Yi had a bad premonition in her heart. His Highness wasn't planning on letting her go tonight. She couldn't help but panic in her heart. She crawled forward a few steps with her hands on the ground. Tears quickly flowed down her face. "Your Highness, Cheng Yi has followed you for so many years and has always been loyal to you. How could I take advantage of this opportunity to harm you? You must believe this servant." "Your Highness." When Xiao Su heard this, he sneered, "When did this prince say that you were unruly?" Cheng Yi's heart skipped a beat. She actually confessed without being pressed. Xiao Su didn't give her a chance to find an excuse. At this time, he looked directly at Cheng Yi, who was kneeling at the bottom of the steps. "If it weren't for the fact that you followed me for so many years, your life would have been in danger the moment you stepped through the door. Without this prince's permission, you casually entered this prince's room in the middle of the night. Have you been following the rules for so many years for nothing?" Cheng Yi lowered her head and tightly gripped her skirt with both hands. She recalled that 8 years ago, when she was selected to train in the King of England's manor, the instructor's first lesson was to make them memorize the 4 imperfections. One of them was that they weren't allowed to enter the Lord's room in the middle of the night. For so many years, these senior servant girls had scrupulously abided by their duties, afraid of violating the rules set by the Lord. But tonight, she clearly violated the rules. Tonight, she cut off all means of retreat. She didn't have a foolproof plan, so her lies were full of holes. She gritted her teeth. Her usually sharp and unkind teeth were hard to justify in front of the gloomy Lord. Her heart couldn't help but tremble. Her whole body couldn't help but tremble. Usually, as long as the Lord gave them a look, they wouldn't dare to say a word. But now, the Lord was in a rage. How could her small body withstand it? "The Lord, Cheng Yi, if it wasn't for the fact that you haven't made any mistakes in all these years, this prince wouldn't have touched you." Xiao Su suddenly spoke. Cheng Yi raised her head and looked at the godlike person in front of her in confusion and horror. "Lord, what are you talking about? This servant doesn't understand a single word." Huo Ling, who was standing to the side, couldn't help but interject angrily, "Cheng Yi, you keep calling the Lord your master, but do you think the Lord doesn't know who you're working for? Don't think that we can't dig out the person behind you just because they're hidden deep. Cheng Yi, His Highness originally saw that you didn't do anything wrong and turned a blind eye, but that went to inform your master. Do you think we are blind?" Cheng Yi was dumbfounded. She had been secretly keeping in contact with Consort Yu. She thought she was doing it secretly, but she didn't expect the Lord to see through her. Huo Ling continued angrily, "Cheng Yi, I thought you were honest, but I didn't expect you to bite the hand that feeds you. Tonight, you sneaked into Master's room. Do you think we don't know what you're up to?" Xiao Lai's riders were either the type who didn't care about appearances, such as Turan, or the type who focused on technology, such as Wood Spirit, or the type who was exquisite and enchanting, such as Water Spirit, or the type who was calm and collected, such as Ethereal, or the type who laughed and cursed all the time like Huo Ling. However, these were all their disguises. They were used to life and death and were only loyal to Xiao Su. They didn't care about what happened in the outside world. If they encountered this kind of situation on a normal day, Huo Ling would have already taken care of it. However, this person had followed the Lord for many years. But in the end, he played the blame game and ignited the anger in his heart. What he hated the most was betrayal. Master had been betrayed by a close relative in the past, which was why he was so cold. Master didn't care about Qing Yi's betrayal, but he couldn't swallow this anger. The companion he had spent so much time with was betrayed once again. This kind of feeling made his heart feel like it was being cut by a knife. He really felt bad for Master. Seeing the figure in the corner of the hallway, Xiao Su lightly said, "Take her away and interrogate her." With these words, her fate was already decided. Cheng Yi immediately kowtowed and said, "Lord, this servant had no choice. This servant didn't want to. I beg the Lord to show mercy. I beg the Lord to take into account that this servant has served you for so many years and spare this servant. Lord." Xiao Su turned around. This action already expressed his meaning. Cheng Yi couldn't help feeling despair, but she still kept crying and begging for mercy. Hualing went forward and sealed her mute acupuncture point. Then two black-clothed people appeared and dragged her away. The figure in the corner slowly walked over. The moonlight soaked her body bit by bit until it illuminated the tranquil expression on her face. Xiao Su watched as the little fellow yawned and walked closer. The gloominess on his face slowly dissipated. "We still have to leave tomorrow. Hurry and go rest. Let Hualing and the others take care of these things." She didn't ask what happened and didn't look at Cheng Yi who was being dragged away. She said this in a daze. He stroked the little fellow's head and replied. Chu Qingyan looked at the servants who ran out because of this big commotion and slightly raised her eyebrows. Originally, Big Ice could directly take them down, but he insisted on taking care of them outside the room. Was he doing this for these people to see? Killing the chicken before leaving to warn the monkeys? Then in this King of England's palace, how many more spies were planted? Chapter 173. Xiao Su called for a servant to bring a cloak. Taking it, he put it on the little fellow's shoulders and then tied it in a knot. Hualing, who had ordered people to take Cheng Yi away, turned around and saw this loving scene. He shook his head and thought inside, Master was becoming more and more skilled at doing these things. Did he really treat little Wang Fei as his own daughter? The image of his 10-year-old master holding the baby-sized little princess appeared in his mind. Hualing immediately trembled from his own thoughts. No, it must be that he hadn't rested well recently for him to have these random thoughts. Hualing patted his head. He decided to go sleep. Big Ice Cube, good night. She wouldn't ask about these things, but that didn't mean she couldn't see what was happening. Chu Qingyan coldly swept her eyes over the people in the yard and sneered in a low voice. If there were any other small movements that dared to hurt the Big Ice Cube, then this girl would deal with them when this girl came back from mining. The next day, Chu Qingyan appeared in male clothing in front of Xiao Su. Xiao Su turned and saw the clothes she was wearing and couldn't help but feel it was familiar. Seeing the Big Ice Cube's slightly surprised expression, Chu Qingyan proudly spun in a circle in front of him and then asked, "How is it? Your clothes from more than 10 years ago fit me well, don't they?" Xiao Su faintly looked at her and mercilessly attacked, "Ben Wang's clothes when he was 8 years old, on you who is almost 11 years old, it does fit you well." Being looked down upon for her height, Chu Qingyan puffed out her cheeks and then deflated. It was true that compared to the Big Ice Cube, she was a bit short. But she was a girl who was almost 11 years old that was as tall as her. "Stand up," she promised she wouldn't beat you to death. Xiao Su didn't pay attention to her dejected little face. He turned to Hong Yi and asked, "Why did you give Wang Fei old clothes? Could it be that Ben Wang can't even afford this little bit of silver?" Chu Qingyan's stabbed heart suddenly healed. She licked her lips. Last night he caught the traitor as an example and this morning he was going to give her a proper status? It seemed like it wasn't that the Big Ice Cube didn't know about the inner residence, he just didn't want to interfere normally. Chi, the Big Ice Cube was hiding his strength. However, this matter really had nothing to do with Hong Yi. When Chu Qingyan saw Hong Yi's awkward expression and didn't know how to answer, she immediately explained, "Don't blame Hong Yi, I wanted to wear them." Hearing this, Xiao Su raised his eyebrows and looked at her. Hearing her words, if the clothes were intact, they could be passed down to the next generation as family heirlooms? Xiao Su patted her little head. "And, if you need anything in the future, just tell me. This prince doesn't lack this bit of money, as long as you're happy." Chu Qingyan was confused. Why did the big ice cube give off the feeling of a domineering CEO when he said this? A large fish pond suddenly appeared in front of her eyes. "Look, you've taken over the entire fish pond." Ha ha ha, what a wild imagination. Fortunately, she stopped this illusion in time. Alright. How could she miss out on this opportunity when the big ice cube opened his mouth? For the sake of her future life as a rice worm. They were going to set off in an hour. Xiao Su was sipping his tea quietly while Chu Qingyan was busy going through the things that they had brought along with them. Xiao Su's gaze finally landed on her body. When she wore this fine brocade dress, he felt that she had grown a lot in the past half-year. Her long hair was tied up high, black like a waterfall flowing down. Her facial features were distinct and her small face was exquisite. She looked exactly like a noble young master. The 11-year-old her seemed to see himself when he was 8 years old. He sipped his tea. Work hard, struggle, and strive to improve. The happy childhood that he hadn't had time to experience, he would give it to the little fellow. He would enjoy the 2 times together. His thin lips slowly hooked up and the smoke curled up. Su Yi dispersed the sorrow of parting. A faint thought appeared in his mind. It seemed like his family's daughter was slowly growing up. Xiao Su shook his head, feeling that it was a bit funny. Because they were going out to carry out a mission and not sightseeing, there was no need for any extravagance, so they couldn't bring many people. However, the big ice cube had given her the task of choosing people early on. She had also chosen carefully. She couldn't do without people around her, but one Xining was enough. She couldn't eat without Huang Yi. Moreover, she heard that the big ice cube had 2 maidservants by his side. One was Lu Yi, who was in charge of accommodation, and the other was Qing Yi, who was in charge of travel. Lu Yi had returned home to visit relatives and was returning home today. Qing Yi usually didn't stay in the inner courtyard, so she had never seen her before. However, since these 2 were in charge of the mission, she felt that the big ice cube would need them this time, so she brought them along. Lan Yi was gentle and weak, so it was fine. Ziyi hadn't come out yet, so there was still Hong Yi. However, she didn't know why, but Hong Yi, who always had a gentle smile and was highly respected by the servants, had a trace of vigilance in her heart. She didn't know why, because a woman's 6th sense was always inexplicable, but it was surprisingly accurate. Moreover, the management of the inner courtyard couldn't be done without Hong Yi, so she arranged for her to be fully in charge of the inner courtyard. Hong Yi didn't show any emotion, and still had a gentle expression on her face as she took care of the management matters. So on this trip, she brought the big ice cube's 3 maidservants with him. They couldn't lack food, shelter, and transportation. Then there were a few second-grade maidservants and a few manservants. Adding everything together, there were around 10 people. Before leaving, she gathered all the stewards and servants in the palace. She was just explaining the following matters and beating up the servants who wanted to slack off when their masters weren't here. Hua Ling and the others who came out with their bags saw the little princess give a proper lecture and they all gave her a thumbs up. After the lecture, Chu Qingyan directed everyone to move the boxes onto the carriage. Everything was done in an orderly manner and there was no need for anyone to worry about it. Hua Ling and the others gave her a thumbs up in their hearts. When they were about to get on the carriage, Chu Qingyan also saw Lve and Qing Yi. Lve was gentle and polite while Qing Yi was lively. The 2 of them bowed to her and Chu Qingyan secretly looked them over before arranging a carriage for them. Anyway, they had all been trained, so they knew what to do on the road better than her, so she didn't need to waste her breath. Everything was prepared. Set out. Hualing rode his horse in front and there were guards on both sides of the carriage. Each person had a serious expression, but they were dressed like normal servants. They walked casually, but if someone who understood the layout saw this, they would be surprised to find that although these people didn't seem to have any order in their movements, no matter where someone attacked, they would be blocked outside. Hong Yi was standing at the door sending them off. She watched the carriages leave and her eyes were as cold as ice. After finishing everything, Chu Qingyan who was lying down in the carriage looked at Xiao Su who was leisurely reading a book and her heart suddenly felt a bit unbalanced. Big Ice Cube, my hands and feet are sore, quickly give me a massage. Chapter 174. Chui Chui. Xiao Su's gaze shifted from the book to her. Chu Qingyan suddenly felt as if she was possessed by ice and immediately changed the topic. She coughed lightly to cover it up. No, I didn't say anything. You heard wrongly. Xiao Su felt that it was a little funny when he heard that. He then shifted his gaze back to the book. Chu Qingyan heaved a sigh of relief. She leaned against the wall of the carriage and rubbed her arms. She was fantasizing about her upcoming life. Although Big Ice Cube was going to mine, the Sichuan Emperor did not give him a time limit. So she could grind Big Ice Cube along the way and swim down the mountain to play in the water. Wouldn't that be perfect? But she didn't know if Big Ice Cube, this workaholic, would agree to her request. She rubbed her arms and couldn't help but feel vexed. It wasn't easy for her to come out. She wanted to take a good look at this era that spanned 1,000 years and see what kind of scenery there was. Xiao Su, who was flipping through the book, couldn't help but hold his forehead when he heard this sigh. Come here. Suddenly hearing someone speak, Chu Qingyan raised her head to look at the person in front of her. Are you calling me? There's a third person in the carriage. Xiao Su looked at her. Oh. Chu Qingyan moved over. Although there was only her and Big Ice Cube, the carriage was very big. It could accommodate at least 5 or 6 people. She moved over with difficulty and looked up at him curiously. Stretch out your hand. Xiao Su ordered. Oh. Chu Qingyan, who was still thinking about playing in the mountains and swimming in the water, gave an order. Xiao Su stretched out his hand to hold her little arm. His fingertips wandered around her acupuncture points and gently tapped. The strength was just right, but his expression was still cold and indifferent. It was as if he wasn't helping the little fellow in front of him to relax her muscles and bones, but was wiping a sword. Chu Qingyan didn't expect Big Ice Cube to be so obedient and help her. She was secretly delighted. After rubbing with her other hand, she turned around. There's more. Xiao Su smiled. His fingers landed on her shoulder and moved slowly. Chu Qingyan felt a warm current flowing out from his nimble fingertips and into her blood vessels. The blocked meridians were unblocked bit by bit, and she felt refreshed all over. After everything was done, she couldn't wait to turn around and ask, Big Ice Cube, were you using your internal energy to unblock my meridians? Xiao Su replied indifferently. Then, he picked up the book that was placed at the side and continued to flip through it. Chu Qingyan's interest was piqued. She turned around and asked, Big Ice Cube, is your inner strength very high? Was his martial arts very powerful? Could it be that if one possessed inner strength, they would be able to regulate their own breathing? For example, I can circulate my qi to reduce my fatigue when I'm tired. All of a sudden, all the questions came pouring out like beans. Xiao Su glanced at her and felt that these questions could be ignored. Do you want to learn? Chu Qingyan's widened eyes immediately sparkled. She nodded without hesitation. Then from today onwards, if the carriage is resting, you can practice martial arts. Chu Qingyan shuddered. The scenery along the way was so beautiful, and she was just going to stay there and practice martial arts? No, I think it's better to forget about it. Xiao Su seemed to have expected this. He shook his head and glanced at her. Then, he looked away and continued to read his book. She puffed up her cheeks. She felt that she had been despised by the big ice cube, but she really didn't want to waste this good time on practicing martial arts, okay? She had been despised by the big ice cube many times anyway, so it didn't matter if it happened one more time or one less time. Xiao Su glanced at a certain someone who had given up on herself and calmly turned the page. Inside the palace, Sichuan Emperor was reviewing memorials when Eunuch Chao entered the hall and reported, "Your Majesty, His Royal Highness has left the capital." Sichuan Emperor put down the memorials in his hands and rubbed his forehead. "We understand." Seeing this, Eunuch Chao immediately asked, "Your Majesty, are you tired? Do you want to rest?" "No need." Sichuan Emperor shook his head. His gaze fell outside the window. It was in the direction of the city gate that Xiao Su had left. He had a faint premonition that he had made an unwise decision this time. But once he decided on something, he would not allow it to be changed. At this moment, a eunuch outside the hall announced loudly, "Consort Yu has arrived." Consort Yu, dressed in a pleated moon dress, leisurely entered the hall. "Your Majesty, I have boiled a cup of ginseng soup for you. Please drink it while it is hot." Consort Yu's voice was gentle and soft. There was a sweet hint of annoyance in her voice, and the smile on her face was just right. Sichuan Emperor was pleased to hear this. He reached out and took her in front of him. He said sympathetically, "You can just ask the palace maids to do these trivial things. Why do you have to do it yourself?" Consort Yu smiled gently. "Your Majesty, how can I let an outsider serve you? Moreover, this is a high-quality 100-year-old ginseng from my maiden family. I am afraid that the palace maids will not be able to make it well. Wouldn't it be a waste of the ginseng?" Consort Yu was very careful with her words. She had only mentioned the Fu family in front of Sichuan Emperor, so it did not seem deliberate. Sichuan Emperor's tiredness dissipated. He patted the back of her hand and sighed. "Your parents are very considerate. It must have been hard on you." Consort Yu covered her mouth and chuckled. She blinked and said coquettishly, "Your Majesty, what are you talking about? You are my heaven, my earth, and my support. It is only right for me to do these things for you. Moreover, the Fu family has always been loyal to the Sichuan imperial family. Your Majesty, you don't have to be so courteous with me." Sichuan Emperor was very pleased to hear this. He reached out and pinched Consort Yu's cheek. He said in a flirtatious tone, "I will go to your place tonight." Consort Yu's fair face was instantly dyed red. She lowered her eyes and punched Sichuan Emperor's chest. She said angrily, "Your Majesty is so mean." The West Xian Emperor burst into laughter as soon as he finished speaking. After a while, Consort Yu looked at Sichuan Emperor, who was drinking the ginseng soup. She asked casually, "Your Majesty, why are you sending His Royal Highness to Fuli mountain range? It is quite far away. It will be a difficult journey. Why don't you send the other officials?" Hearing this, Sichuan Emperor put down the bowl of soup. Consort Yu immediately handed him a handkerchief. Sichuan Emperor took it and wiped the corners of his mouth. He looked at Consort Yu, who had a confused look on her face, and said slowly, "You are still so considerate of Su, But he might not appreciate it." "Your Majesty, what are you saying? His Royal Highness is your flesh and blood. I also see him as my own child. It is natural for me to care about him." Consort Yu shook her head with a smile. Sichuan Emperor smiled. Then his eyes turned cold. It is not convenient for us to tell you this. But you have to believe that we are making plans for Ranner." Consort Yu narrowed her eyes. What was it that made His Majesty so secretive? However, she didn't reveal any of her thoughts on her face. She continued to serve him with all her heart. But her heart had already turned 100 times. No matter what His Majesty was planning, she had to make sure that Xiao Su would never return. Chapter 175. Perhaps this was the difference between her and Empress Liang. One was expressionless while the other showed all her emotions on her face. Men always liked the cute and lovable type, so it was destined that Empress Liang would not be able to beat Consort Yu. Eunuch Chao had already left when Consort Yu went in. When he heard the teasing from inside, he sighed in his heart. In this inner palace, although the concubines were all treated equally, only Consort Yu could receive this kind of treatment. She was favored by the inner palace and received the emperor's love. He raised his head to look at the city gates with a bit of pity in his heart. His Royal Highness, take care of yourself. The carriage traveled for half a day before stopping to rest. There was a small lake nearby, and at this time, the servants took out pots, bowls, ladles, basins, and other utensils from the carriage. Huo Ling saw this scene when he got off the horse and jumped in fright. He asked Huang Yi, who was in charge, "Did you move the entire kitchen?" Huang Yi patted the dust off her hands and replied with a smile, "This was ordered by the little princess, I'm just following orders. However, you also know that I'm in charge of the food. If I don't have these utensils, how can I cook for everyone?" So when the little princess had her prepare the utensils, she had raised both her hands and feet in agreement. Huo Ling clicked his tongue. The little princess was truly a foodie. Xiao Su got off the carriage and saw the servants methodically burning the fire and cutting the vegetables. He raised a brow. "You ordered this?" Chu Qingyan giggled. She never thought of hiding it because as long as it was time to eat, these things would be exposed. She said with a smile, "Big ice cube, people are made of iron and rice is made of steel. If I don't eat, I'll be hungry. So, these are all necessities for a long trip." "Oh, no, it's for a long trip to mine, so I brought them along." Xiao Su poured a bucket of cold water on her. "You brought them along with you in a carriage." Chu Qingyan complained. "Can you not tear me down like this? If you have the skills, don't eat it later." However, she wouldn't dare to say this out loud even if she was beaten to death, because the one who wouldn't be able to eat it later would probably be her. At this time, Huo Ling walked over and overheard the conversation between the two masters. He couldn't help but explain, "Little princess, in another 2 or 3 days, we will probably enter a desolate place. I'm afraid that when we get there won't be any ingredients to cook. That's why Lord is worried that these things will become a burden and can't be used." Chu Qingyan couldn't help but smile. "Huo Ling, I've studied the map. I've considered all of this, so don't worry." Huo Ling nodded when he heard this. Little Princess Consort was becoming more and more methodical, so he was not worried. "By the way, where is Turin? Why didn't I see him along the way?" Chu Qingyan looked around, but she still couldn't find him. Normally, he was always inseparable from Huo Ling. Why did he disappear the moment he left the city? Huo Ling smiled mysteriously. "Little princess, it's because this subordinate is an open guard and Turin is a secret guard." Chu Qingyan immediately understood what he meant when he told her to stop. Huo Ling was the guard that followed by Big Ice Cube's side, and Turin was hidden in the shadows, responsible for protecting it from the shadows. She thought about it and then turned to say to Xining, "Go and take out some of the food we prepared yesterday and give it to Huo Ling." Huo Ling watched in confusion as Xining left. When she came back, there was a white cloth bag in her hand. "This is..." Huo Ling took the white cloth bag and opened it to take a look. He found that there were 2 small bags inside. One bag was steamed buns that were cut to the thickness of a palm, and the other bag seemed to be dried meat. Chu Qingyan saw his surprise and couldn't help laughing as she said, "Give the things to Turin and tell him to take out 2 steamed buns and a piece of meat. Use the steamed buns to hold the meat and it's ready to eat. This is called rujiamo. If possible, you can heat up the rujiamo in the fire. The taste will be even better." Huo Ling looked at the things in the bag in disbelief. This was his first time hearing this method of eating. It felt so fresh, he would secretly try it later. "That's right, I don't know how many people he has with him. If it's not enough, I'll send people to get more. There's a lot, so there's no need to worry about not having enough. Moreover, I've already taught Huang Yi how to make these jerkies. When we rest on the road, she will roast the meat and hang it on the roof of the carriage to dry. You guys will be responsible for looking after it when the time comes, don't let the birds take it away. Chu Qingyan thought about it and casually said this. Since Turan was in the shadows, he definitely wouldn't show himself to eat with them, so they could only wrong them like this. Hualing turned around to look at the nailed roofs of the carriages. No wonder the little princess ordered Hualing to remake the carriages, so it was for this reason. It had to be said that the little princess had done all she could to eat, but this was also good. They would have enough food on the road, so they wouldn't have to eat steamed buns every day like before. Thinking of this, Hualing's heart was filled with tears. It really was good to have a head wife. Woo, little princess, how good would it be if you appeared earlier? We've been eating stone-like steamed buns for several years now. So Hualing was willing to be a diligent worker drying the meat for free. But if Chu Qingyan knew what he was thinking right now, she would spit out 3 liters of blood. Appear earlier? How early? She didn't want to transmigrate as a baby and not be able to take care of herself. She followed Hualing's gaze to look at the carriages. Actually, she had spent quite a bit of effort on these carriages. Was it just drying meat? No, it wasn't that simple. The retired emperor sat in the chair prepared by the servants. He stroked his beard and laughed. I say, grandson, you've picked up a treasure. Such a thrifty and diligent wife, it's rare to meet one. It was like this was a marriage bestowed by this one and he loved to praise this one. Xiao Su ignored him. His eyes swept over the nailed roofs of the carriages and then he looked at the folding chairs in front of him as he fell into deep thought. At this time, Hualing walked over and said in a voice filled with admiration, Master, the little princess is truly smart. This subordinate never thought of the structure of these carriages. Not only can they be used to dry things, they can also be used to defend against sneak attacks. The 2 ends of the nails were specially made sharp. If someone took the chance to land on them, they would experience the feeling of being pierced by needles. Moreover, this subordinate never thought that the chair could be made into a foldable shape. When it is needed, it can be opened. When it is not needed, it can be folded and put away. It does not take up space and is convenient to carry. Young Princess Consort's idea is really novel. Turan's eyes lit up. He was already the only one in the world of creativity. Now that he saw the little princess reveal this skill, he was instantly filled with passion. It was rare to hear Turan praise someone so sincerely. The people under him were all leaders in their own fields. Although they didn't think they were extraordinary, they still had their own pride. It could be seen that this little fellow really hid his strength well. A faint smile appeared in Xiao Su's eyes. But on the following road, Chu Qingyan's actions made everyone's jaws drop again and again. Chapter 176. Chu Qingyan walked to the resting area and saw that Big Ice Cube and Imperial Grandfather were both sitting on the chairs specially made for her by the wood spirit. Her heart was filled with joy. However, the moment she sat down, she saw Imperial Grandfather's cheeks puffed up. She didn't know what he was chewing, but when she saw the minced meat at the corner of his mouth, her face instantly darkened. Imperial Grandfather, you went to get a Rujiemo to eat? The Emperor Emeritus immediately shook his head. Even if he was beaten to death, he wouldn't admit that someone of his noble status would do something like stealing food. Chu Qingyan sighed. Imperial Grandfather, you're too fast. I originally wanted to teach you another way to eat. The Emperor Emeritus's eyes emitted a green light, like a hungry wolf that saw its prey. He forcefully swallowed the food in his mouth and impatiently said, What other way to eat? Quickly say it. As soon as he finished speaking, the Emperor Emeritus felt that he had been tricked, because the Yen lass in front of him was looking at him with disdain. The Emperor Emeritus smashed his bowl in dissatisfaction and turned to his grandson for help. Quickly control your lass. She's so impudent. She dares to treat her elders like this now, who knows if she'll dare to make you starve in the future. Xiao Su looked at him indifferently. Grandson won't steal food. A bolt from the blue. His grandson had turned evil and was led astray by his little wife. He was full of grievances and quietly muttered, "Isn't it just stealing a Rujiamo? So petty." Chu Qingyan looked at the Emperor Emeritus, who was drawing circles on the side, and couldn't help but find it funny. She felt that she needed to explain, so she took the soup that Huang Yi had scooped and handed it to him. She said with a smile, "Imperial grandfather, the Rujiamo is too dry. It won't be too late to eat it after drinking some soup. Otherwise, it won't be good if you choke." The Emperor Emeritus smelled the fragrance, and the haze on his face cleared away. "Yen lass, we know you're the best." Chu Qingyan felt that this Emperor Emeritus really was like an old urchin and couldn't help but say, "In the future, you can take whatever you want to eat. Don't be polite." The Emperor Emeritus immediately glanced at her, lowered his eyes, and asked in a small and uncertain voice, "Really?" Seeing how careful he was, Chu Qingyan's heart softened. She nodded seriously. "Yes." The retired emperor's eyes widened, his face beaming with joy. He immediately turned to Gu Rong and said, "Help me move the pastries from the last carriage to my carriage." Chu Qingyan almost hit her head on the tree behind her. Fortunately, Big Ice Cube was quick enough to hold her head. Gu Rong was a personal guard assigned by Xiao Su to the retired emperor. The retired emperor waved at her, "Yen lass, thank you." Looking at the Emperor Emeritus's complacent appearance, Chu Qingyan couldn't help but admit that the older the ginger, the spicier it was. She was still too naive. She would never play with him again. Humph. When Xiao Su saw this, for some reason, he felt like laughing. It was a rare sight for him to see his family in such a harmonious and joyful manner. "Big Ice Cube, I've prepared some non-sweet pastries for you. I had intended for you to pass the time on the road, but I'm afraid you can only drink tea to accompany the air." Chu Qingyan looked at the cloth bags that Gu Rong was carrying in her hands, in her arms and on her shoulders. She couldn't help but turn to him and sighed. Xiao Su laughed in spite of himself as he patted her head, "It's fine." Chu Qingyan turned to look at the Emperor Emeritus, who was happily drinking his soup and couldn't help but smile. Having an old man at home was like having a treasure. After the group finished their lunch, they rested for a while and prepared to set off. Just at this moment, a man dressed in black appeared in front of Xiao Su. "Master, the carriages have already left the city in different directions according to your request. The people inside have all changed their appearances so that no one will notice the difference." Xiao Su calmly replied. Chu Qingyan pondered in her heart when she heard this. When they left the city gates today, she discovered that there were more than 10 carriages following behind them, but in the end, they all disappeared. She thought that it should be the Big Ice Cube's smokescreen. No one knew what would happen along the way, so it was best to be careful. But what made her feel even more uneasy was that when she left the city gates, there was a voice in her subconscious that warned her of danger. She closed her eyes. Since they were already out of the city, then let nature take its course. She had a strong backing by her side, so she wasn't afraid. At this moment, Xiao Su had already entered the carriage. When he saw the little fellow's scrunched-up face, he couldn't help but ask, "Are you still angry at Imperial Grandfather for taking away all the pastries?" When Chu Qingyan heard that, she regained her senses and smiled slyly, "How am I such a petty person? Moreover, when we reach Jiangnan in a few days, we can buy whatever delicious food we want. When that time comes, if Imperial Grandfather can't finish the pastries in the carriage, he won't be allowed to eat the newly bought pastries. It's very shameful to waste food." Xiao Su shook his head, "That's right, you're not petty at all." After eating and drinking her fill, Chu Qingyan lazily leaned against the wall of the carriage, listening to the Big Ice Cube teasing her. She shrugged her shoulders. It wasn't that she wanted to make things difficult for retired emperor, but she felt that he had hidden too many secrets from her. She would probably encounter countless hardships in the future. It was too much. However, everything was just for fun. Retired Emperor was like an old urchin, and she liked to play with him. At this moment, Gu Rong's voice sounded from outside the carriage. "Young Princess Consort, retired Emperor invites you to taste the pastries together." Chu Qingyan looked up in surprise. At this time, the pastries had already been handed over. After Chu Qingyan received them, she inspected the pastries to see if there were any problems. After confirming that there were no problems, she picked up a piece of plum jade cake and put it in her mouth. She was puzzled as she asked the person in front of her, "Imperial grandfather's behavior seems a bit strange. Did he suddenly have a conscience?" But it was a bit impossible. He regarded pastries as his life and was wild with joy just now. He was simply like an ancient version of Granddad Ah. Xiao Su hit the nail on the head. Imperial grandfather came back to his senses and felt that you had a trick up your sleeve, so he offered the pastries to show his sincerity. He hopes that you will be lenient in the future. Fuck. Chu Qingyan couldn't swallow the pastry in her mouth. She looked at the 3 pieces of pastries on the plate. She only had 4 thumb-sized plum jade cakes in her mouth. It was rare for Imperial grandfather to make a move. Even if he wanted to bribe someone, he shouldn't do it like this. Ah. Do you think it's too late for me to retreat now? It's already too late. Sob sob, Chu Qingyan felt that she had been hit again and again. She needed to be comforted. Looking at the little fellow who had fallen head first into his arms, Xiao Su gently patted her head. After thinking about it, perhaps Imperial grandfather's idea of traveling together was a good idea. At least it could slowly train the little fellow's IQ. Thus, His Royal Highness, who was usually protective of his own, decided that in the future, he would not intervene in the battle of wits between the little fellow and Imperial grandfather. If Chu Qingyan knew what Xiao Su was thinking at this time, she would probably vomit blood. Fighting with the retired emperor to improve her IQ? And then he would watch with folded arms? Could he not be so heartless? Thus, the whole journey passed by in such a way. Chu Qingyan and the others welcomed the first night outside of the capital. As night fell, the residence of the King of England welcomed a group of mysterious people. Chapter 177. It was already late at night, but the quiet King of England's palace was not calm at this time. On top of the high wall, dozens of black shadows leaped up. The person in the lead was dressed in purple. His demonic eyes swept across the palace that was somewhat hazy under the light of the lanterns, and the corners of his mouth curled into an ambiguous smile. The night was dark and the wind was strong. It was the best time to make a move. He gently waved his hand and the black-robed people following him were like arrows that left the bow. They quickly scattered to every corner of the palace like ghosts and no one noticed them. Higashio Motetsu looked at the inner courtyard of the King of England's palace that was not as guarded as last time and raised his brows. As expected, he had to search when Xiao Su was not here. This time, he brought the best hidden guards who were good at qinggong. They were very good at hiding, so it was not a problem for them to hide from the guards inside. So he swept his eyes over the direction and flew towards the study. Success or failure, it all depended on this one move. At this time, Chu Qingyan's group had stopped to rest. The fire was burning. Huo Ling arranged for guards to take turns. Right now, in this place where there were no villages or shops, safety was very important because it was said that bandits often appeared here. Moreover, at night, fierce beasts would appear, so Huo Ling did not dare relax his vigilance. It was already late autumn and the night was very cold, so it was not suitable to sleep in the carriage. But Chu Qingyan was already prepared. She ordered people to take out the things in the carriage. At first, no one knew what it was, but when Mu Ling ordered people to prop it up on the ground, everyone was surprised to find that these things could be propped up and turned into tents. Chu Qingyan nodded her head in satisfaction. Back in the king's residence, she had only described the appearance and material of the item to the wood spirit, and the wood spirit had actually been able to understand it and make it in an instant. As expected, the big ice cube subordinates were indeed powerful. This kind of tent was modeled after the modern world's camping tents. The fabric was made from Sichuan's special ink yarn. It was not easy to get wind and was light. It was simply a necessity for traveling at home. The Emperor Emeritus patrolled the area with his hands behind his back. He stroked his beard and said to Chu Qingyan out of the blue, "Yen lass, the things you have there are really not bad." Chu Qingyan blushed with shame. "Imperial grandfather, is it really good for you to say it out loud?" When Xiao Su heard this, he turned to look at her. She immediately played dead. "All right, I'll sleep here tonight." The retired emperor simply didn't care about Chu Qingyan's predicament. He chose a tent and immediately went in. He even sighed comfortably. Chu Qingyan and Xiao Su each chose a tent and went to rest. It was late at night. Outside, there was only the sound of the burning firewood and the whistling of the mountain wind. The night was still quiet. Xiao Su was lying in the tent. His body was covered with a blanket that had been basked in the sun. He could still feel the warmth of the sun. He slightly hooked his lips. He had to admit that this little fellow, in this short day, had given him too many unexpected surprises. Just as he was about to fall asleep, he suddenly heard a series of footsteps slowly approaching from the side. Then, he saw a shadow reflected on his tent through the firelight. Finally, the shadow hesitated outside for a moment before raising its hand and patting his tent lightly. "Big Ice Cube, can I sleep with you tonight?" At this moment, in the King of England's residence, the black-clothed men were conducting a carpet search. Higashio Motetsu had just landed by the study's window when two shadow guards dropped down from the beam and waved their swords at him. Higashio Motetsu didn't expect that even if Xiao Su had taken away the elites, there would still be such powerful shadow guards in his residence. However, he was already prepared. He pulled out the folding fan at his waist and lightly blocked one of the shadow guard's swords. He dodged sideways, and the other shadow guard's sword was also avoided. At this moment, Dongting Wangyu's eyes flashed with a hint of evilness. The folding fan that he used to block the blades suddenly opened. Coincidentally, the evening wind blew, and the powder on the folding fan flew towards the two shadow guards. The shadow guards couldn't dodge in time and were hit by the powder, falling to the ground. From the moment they landed to the end of the three people's fight, it was only a blink of an eye. A fight between experts was so fast. It didn't alarm anyone. Higashio Motetsu put away the folding fan and shook his head. "This young lord doesn't like to use swords and knives the most. It affects my demeanor too much." Thus, he leaped over the two of them and leaped into the study through the window. There was no candlelight in the study. He could only distinguish the layout of the room through the bright moonlight. He walked to the desk and flipped through the documents on it. He looked carefully and then turned to the bookshelf and flipped through the books one by one. He looked around to see if there were any hidden mechanisms or hidden corners. Although the fight just now was silent, it was inevitable that someone would pass by later and his heart would be exposed. So he still had to be nimble. But after searching for half a day, he found nothing. He couldn't help but squint. Could it be that it wasn't here? At this moment, he felt someone approaching. His eyes darkened and he turned to put the things on the desk away. But when his fingers touched a wooden box, he paused. He was so focused on looking that he didn't notice what was inside. He only remembered that it was a stack of paper. So he opened it again and picked up the paper on top to read it under the moonlight. Loosely tied up in a precious bun, light makeup done. Green smoke and jade green fog cover light and graceful, fluttering and wandering. Meeting is like not meeting, how can excessive affection be like heartlessness? After the music and song, just waking up, deep in the courtyard under the moonlight, quiet. Poet Sima Guang. It was signed by Chu Qingyan. Higashio Motetsu felt that this poem was well written. But who was Sima Guang? Why hadn't he heard of this person? But these words were really not flattering. He thought of that little face on the tree that was a little depressed after being teased by him and couldn't help but chuckle. At this moment, the sound of footsteps approached. He restrained his expression and stuffed the poem into his sleeve. With a leap, he left the study. He flashed out of the courtyard and heard a clamor. They must have discovered the two shadow guards. Higashio Motetsu chuckled. He felt the pleasure of doing something bad. His figure flitted about in the mansion and soon left the mansion. Finally, he stood outside the wall and the men in black had returned. The leader of the men in black stepped forward and said, reporting to young palace master, "We have searched the King of England's residence and didn't find that thing. We suspect that this thing isn't in the King of England's residence." Higashio Motetsu lazily leaned against the tree. He tapped the folding fan in his palm and said softly, "Could it have been taken away by Xiaosu? We think it's very possible." The leader of the men in black responded. Higashio Motetsu sighed softly and pretended to be troubled. This is really troublesome. What this young master hates the most is running around. All the men in black were speechless. But in order to get the thing back, this young master has to make a trip personally. Young master, if you want to go sightseeing, just say so. We won't say anything. I heard that Xiaosu and the rest are going to mine. The little girl is also there. TSK, it's so novel just thinking about it. Young master, novel. He had a bad premonition. Let's go mine together. They were already used to this kind of young master. Chapter 178. In the dead of night. Inside the Moon Palace, a figure stood under the palace lantern. Among the shadows, one could tell that it was a woman with a good figure. A gust of wind blew away the thin palace veil, revealing the face of the person inside. Imperial concubine Moon's face was calm and restless. She stood there for a while as if she was waiting for someone. Suddenly, the candlelight flickered. Imperial concubine Moon couldn't help but close her eyes. When she opened them again, a black-clothed person had appeared in front of her. His entire body was covered by a cloak, making it impossible to see his appearance or figure. She could only feel that this person was very tall, but his entire body exuded a gloomy aura of death. But when Imperial concubine Moon looked over, the gloominess on his body faded a great deal. "Why did you order someone to summon me at this time? Is there something important?" The person's voice was low and slightly hoarse. She couldn't tell his age or gender. It seemed that he had changed his voice intentionally. As soon as Imperial concubine Moon saw who it was, she revealed a smile. "You came. I knew you would come." "Yes." The cloaked person nodded. "But you're too bold. The palace is heavily guarded. It's better to be careful." The cloaked person said. "With your martial arts, it's easy for you to enter the palace. Consort, you didn't care." Then, she went straight to the point. Xiaosu was sent to the Fuli mountain range to investigate the mine. "What do you think about this?" "It's just a suicide mission," the cloaked person replied nonchalantly. "A suicide mission?" "Consort, you didn't understand. For so many years, the Fuli mountain range has been covered in snow. It's close to the border of the southern kingdom. If there was a mine, it would have been excavated a long time ago. Why wait until now?" The cloaked person stood with his hands behind his back and analyzed for her. "What does your majesty mean?" Consort Yu was a little confused. Since there was no mine, why would he send Xiaosu to search for it? Suddenly, her eyes lit up with surprise. "Could it be that your majesty wants to send Xiaosu away and use this period of time to nurture his forces and let him take root in the empire?" The cloaked man nodded slightly, not entirely. Cultivating Ranner is one of the reasons, and making Xiaosu disappear from this world is another reason. However, I think that there is another reason, but we can't find it yet. However, I have to say that Sichuan Emperor really treats you and your mother very well. He spends all his time and energy on you. How do I make Xiaosu disappear?" Consort Yu asked immediately. That was what she was most concerned about. Xiao Su was a thorn in her side. She had to get rid of him as soon as possible. Do you know why the news of going to Fuli mountain range to search for ores is known to everyone? The cloaked man asked. It can't be that your majesty sent someone to spread the news. Consort Yu shook her head. Although your majesty didn't like Xiao Su, he wouldn't be so vicious. Sichuan Emperor didn't give the order, but he knows that someone will do it. Those who are jealous of Xiao Su and those who are at odds with the Liang family will do it. This way, the whole world will know that there are ores in Fuli mountain range. Then, those ambitious royals, those rich people who want to make huge profits, and those who don't care about their lives will all turn their attention to Fuli mountain range. When that time comes, Fuli mountain range will become a slaughterhouse. But there are no ores there. Consort Yu frowned and asked. So what if there are no ores? Many people don't know the truth. They would rather believe that there are ores than not. They would rather kill 3,000 innocents than let one go. If there really are ores, they will take a share of it no matter what. Moreover, if they can't get it, they won't let others get it either. This is the psychology of human nature. The cloaked man sneered. Because he had changed his voice, he couldn't speak. It sounded very strange and gave people goosebumps. Consort Yu's eyes flashed with a sinister smile. It seems that I don't have to interfere. This matter has already spread like wildfire. Ha, it seems that Xiao Su won't be far from death this time even if I don't do anything. But as soon as she finished speaking, Consort Yu frowned again. No, I'm still worried. As long as Xiao Su is alive, I won't be at peace. What do you want to do? The cloaked man raised his voice, as if he didn't agree. If you don't remove the roots when you cut the weeds, they will grow again when the spring breeze comes. I thought that he would die on the battlefield. I thought that I could kill him with assassination after assassination, but he escaped every time. This time, the opportunity is so good. I can't just let it go, so. Consort Yu looked at the cloaked man and said in a tone that brooked no argument, I want you to issue a kill order. Help me get rid of Xiao Su completely so that I can rest easy. The cloaked man muttered, it's not that I can't issue a kill order, but do you really want to do it? He met Consort Yu's pleading eyes and finally sighed. Fine, fine. I'll let you be stubborn for so many years. Consort Yu saw that he had compromised and couldn't help but feel happy. I knew you were the best to me. The cloaked man smiled bitterly and shook his head. The Sichuan Emperor was the best to you. Even a vicious tiger wouldn't eat its own cubs, but he made an exception for you and your mother. With a wave of his cloak, he disappeared. Consort Yu looked at the wide-open window and laughed softly. Liang Yuan, this time, I want to see how you're going to fight with me. In the inner hall. Xiao Ho was playing chess with himself, holding a white piece in one hand and a black piece in the other. Master, the King of England is already 7 miles away. A subordinate knelt in front of him and reported. Xiao Ho placed a white piece, as if he didn't pay much attention to the subordinate's report. The heater was still burning, and the whole room was as warm as spring. The palace maids changed a new teacup. It was Biluakun tea. Xiao Ho picked up the teacup and gently slid the lid over the floating tea leaves. His movements were slow and deliberate, and he was living a refined and luxurious life. It was hard for outsiders to imagine that the third prince, who was always weak and delicate, had a smile on his face, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was as if he was an unpredictable wild wolf lying in ambush, waiting for an opportunity to take a bite out of you. Master, everything is still calm at the moment. Should we make a move? The subordinate suggested. Xiao Ho put down the teacup and took the brocade handkerchief from the palace maid. He wiped the corner of his mouth and said faintly, no need. It's not the right time yet. Moreover, there are many people who can't hold back. Why should we be the first to make a move? Yes, Master's consideration is more thorough than mine. The subordinate bowed his head and responded. Xiao Ho continued to play chess. His eyes fell on the chessboard. His hand that was holding a piece paused slightly. After a moment of contemplation, he slowly said, "However, I don't think this should be a simple trip to the mine. Father should have other instructions. You send someone to pay close attention to the King of England's every move and find out the secret mission." "Yes, master." The subordinate immediately accepted the order. Xiao Ho placed the last piece, and the game was set. The white pieces completely outflanked the black pieces, and the black pieces were defeated. On a moonless and windy night, how many conspiracies were staged one by one? The night was too cold, and the wind was too cold. Could the people who were on a long journey have a safe and smooth journey? Chapter 179. The night had engulfed the entire land, except for one place that still had a warm light. "Big Ice Cube, can I sleep with you tonight?" She was a little hesitant and a little timid. Xiao Su subconsciously wanted to refuse, but when his gaze fell on the restless black figure, he couldn't look away. The wait was torturous. After waiting for a while, there was no response. Chu Qingyan was a little discouraged. Was Big Ice Cube sleeping soundly? Or was he trying to use silence to refuse her? "Forget it, I'll just squeeze in with Xining for a night." Just as she was about to turn and leave, she heard the sound of the tent opening. She lowered her head and met a pair of bottomless eyes. "Come in." Her heart was filled with joy as she replied, "Okay." Then she quickly squeezed her way in. The tent wasn't big, just enough for one person to put down a blanket and pillow. It would be crowded with one more person, but luckily Chu Qingyan was petite and her figure was just right. It wouldn't make a difference whether she was there or not. After squeezing into the warm blanket, she couldn't help but sigh. The night in the mountains was really too cold. Just standing there for a while, she felt so cold that she couldn't stand it. The tent wasn't big, so Xiao Su could acutely feel the chill from her body. He reached out to pull her hands and covered them with his. He couldn't feel the warmth from her cold hands. He immediately frowned. "It's such a cold day, don't you know how to put on more clothes?" Although she brought a blanket, it was obvious that it would be crowded if she put it in, so she put the blanket outside the tent and shared it with Big Ice Cube. Even though she had the body of a 10-year-old, she still had the mind of a 20-year-old. So she tried her best to keep a distance between them, but she didn't expect that when Big Ice Cube pulled her, her entire body would almost stick to him. Chu Qingyan's face heated up slightly, and she replied in a low voice, "I forgot just now." She was only concerned with being afraid and couldn't care about anything else. Xiao Su heard this and remained silent. He just silently circulated his energy to disperse the chill from her body. The wind in the mountains was humid, and if it entered the body, it would damage the spirit. After a while, her whole body felt warm. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but reveal a satisfied smile. When Xiao Su saw her curled up in front of him like a kitten, he released his hand and asked coolly, "Why did you suddenly want to sleep with this prince? You're already 10 years old, and you'll be of marriageable age in a few years. If you still sleep with others, people will laugh at you." Fortunately, Xiao Su rarely came into contact with women. His first thought was not that men and women should not be too close to each other. Instead, he felt that the little fellow was still too weak after years of fighting on the battlefield and going out to gain experience. How could he protect himself when he grew up? Chu Qingyan blushed and whispered, "I've slept in a tent before, but a snake sneaked in at night and bit me, so, back then, when she went to the wilderness to survive, it was because of this incident that she was left with a sequela. She didn't dare to sleep alone outside at night, especially in the wilderness. The past was unbearable to recall. I originally wanted to find Xining, but I don't know why I couldn't help but walk over to you. If it's not convenient for you, I'll go out now." It seems like she still caused trouble for Big Ice Cube. He was such a delicate person since he was young, so he probably wasn't used to sharing a bed with others. Just as she was about to get up, a force suddenly came from her waist and pulled her into his embrace. She was caught off guard and bumped into his lean chest. Through the thin clothes, she seemed to be able to hear his strong heartbeat. "Stop messing around. Could it be that you want to be exposed to the cold wind again?" Xiao Su softly reprimanded her. He pressed her against him with one hand and lifted the blanket to her neck to prevent her from catching a cold. When Chu Qingyan came back to her senses, she was already nestled in his embrace. She was instantly moved. Although his tone was a bit bad, he still locked her in his embrace, not allowing her to be exposed to the cold wind. She felt an indescribable desire to rely on this person. "Thank you, Big Ice Cube," she softly said. Perhaps she really did rely on this person, or perhaps she really did place this person in her heart as important as her parents, so when she was tossing and turning in the tent, the first person that flashed through her mind was him. Perhaps if she told her friends in university that she went to an adult man's place in the middle of the night to sleep with him, they would probably scold her to death. She didn't have any sense of safety at all. But she believed in Big Ice Cube's character. Moreover, Big Ice Cube really doted on her like she was his daughter. Although the age difference was a bit. That was why she was so thick-skinned as to take a picture of his tent. Now that she thought about it, it was a bit strange. How could she have the courage to make such a request? But when that warm and comforting chest held her, she felt that everything wasn't that important anymore. "Big Ice Cube, I have a question I want to ask you." Before she went to sleep, she suddenly thought of something, but she was a bit hesitant when she asked. He replied a bit casually. "When did you wake up last night?" "What I mean is, you were clearly very drunk, so how could you have just woken up when Cheng Yi went in?" She had always wanted to ask this question because she wanted to know, when she wanted to pick up his mask, was he already sober? If he had already woken up, but allowed her to pick up his mask, did that mean he was willing to let her see his true appearance? If he hadn't woken up at the time, why would Cheng Yi's improper actions have been discovered? Nothing made sense. This king is very sensitive to smells. Xiao Su only replied with this one sentence before falling silent. Chu Qingyan's eyes were filled with confusion. Could it be that he had woken up because he smelled Huang Yi's scent? Then what about her? Could it be that Big Ice Cube had lost his sense of smell from her body? This question was so hard to solve. The person who revealed the answer was so stingy. She was in a daze as she thought about it, then fell asleep. Xiao Su listened to the even breathing of the person in his arms and his lips slightly hooked. People who practiced martial arts always had a thread in their minds that was stretched taut. If there was any movement around them, they would immediately wake up. This was self-defense. But they would also relax their vigilance towards the people around them who were close to them. And the little fellow, in these days of getting along with each other, had already made him accustomed to her existence. This was also the reason why she was able to get within 3 steps of him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been so assured to give himself to the little fellow after getting drunk. There was no one in the King of England's palace who didn't know about their lord's taboos. As soon as everyone entered the palace, they were already informed that they were allowed to make mistakes, but they couldn't violate the lord's 4 prohibitions. They weren't allowed to enter the study at will. They weren't allowed to enter the room in the middle of the night. They weren't allowed to get within 3 steps of him. They weren't allowed to criticize in private. These 4 prohibitions were obeyed by everyone. It was just that these 2 people, unknowingly, got closer little by little. In the beginning, it had nothing to do with love, it had nothing to do with interests and strategies, and it had nothing to do with wealth and family background. It was pure as water. Chapter 180. When she woke up early in the morning, there was only her and a blanket left in the tent. Where was the Big Ice Cube? She glanced around and finally sobered up and got up. The moment Chu Qingyan came out of the tent, she saw Xining holding a basin of water and waiting outside with her head lowered. Just as she was about to speak to Xining, she instantly felt everyone's gaze turn towards her. She raised her head in confusion and saw those people immediately looking elsewhere, pretending to be very busy. Chu Qingyan felt that these people were strange, but she had to wash up first. She turned to look at Xining and suddenly realized that Xining was also a little strange today. From the moment she came out of the tent, she had not said a single word. Xining. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but call out to her. Xining raised her head and looked at her smilingly with her round eyes. Master, are you going to wash up? Chu Qingyan raised her hand to rub her chin and looked at her suspiciously. Speak, what's going on? Why is it so strange when I come out? Xining laughed mischievously. Master, last night you... She raised her hand and pointed at the tent behind her master. Chu Qingyan followed her line of sight and suddenly understood. She raised her hand to slap her hand and said disapprovingly, Little girl, you're so young, why are you thinking of such unhealthy things? She deliberately raised her voice to let the fire spirits who were listening attentively hear her. Xining asked doubtfully, unhealthy? No, it's just that the fire spirits said this morning that master is too timid, so she ran to Lord's tent. Chu Qingyan's face darkened. She felt that she had misunderstood. She looked around and saw everyone nodding at the same time. Little Princess Consort, you're too timid. Chu Qingyan was so angry that her head was on fire. So what if she was timid? Was it not allowed for people to have weaknesses? Master, you are even more timid than Xining. Xining will accompany you in the future. Xining said very seriously. Chu Qingyan felt as if an arrow had pierced her knee. She wanted to cry but had no tears. Thank you for Xining. When they arrived at the dining area, the tables were also pieced together. Chu Qingyan sat down on a chair with a dejected look on her face. She had painstakingly built up her reputation when the ice cube was being wronged. Now, it had fallen back to square one in one night. Yen lass, I heard that last night you... The Emperor Emeritus touched a sore spot. Chu Qingyan waved her hand weakly and said perfunctorily, I know. You also want to laugh at me for being a coward. Just laugh, the retired emperor laughed heartily at her words. Yen lass, I'm not talking about this. Then what do you want to say? It was rare that the retired emperor didn't laugh at her for being a coward. She couldn't help but feel refreshed. It seemed that the retired emperor wasn't the kind of person who would hit someone when they were down. She wouldn't bicker with him about the pastries from before. She saw the retired emperor approach her mysteriously and whisper into her ear, Is my grandson's tofu delicious? She was struck by lightning. Chu Qingyan felt as if she had been charred by lightning. Only now did she remember that there was someone here who was familiar with her background. How could she have forgotten? Imperial grandfather, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't speak whatever you want. We're innocent. Chu Qingyan argued with all her might. Don't worry, I understand. Wan and I also went through this in the past. Don't think that there's a generation gap between us just because we're separated by several generations. Imperial grandfather is very open-minded. The retired emperor patted her shoulder in a very righteous manner, almost knocking her lungs out. Imperial grandfather, what the hell do you know? Chu Qingyan felt that she would only make things worse, so she simply shut her mouth and didn't want to say anything else. But the retired emperor clearly didn't want to let her go. He half tempted and half threatened her, Yen lass, it's fine if you don't want me to say anything. When we reach a prosperous place, remember not to be stingy. Under the heavens, all lands belong to the emperor, on the shores of the earth, all are the emperor's subjects. Under the heavens, all lands belong to the emperor, so why do you keep thinking about my purse? Every sentence was about food. Chu Qingyan felt that this retired emperor was getting closer and closer to her father. The retired emperor had an, I don't blame you if you don't understand, expression. Don't you know what it means to see happiness on the other shore? Eating other people's things and using other people's things is much happier than spending your own money. Chu Qingyan blushed with shame. She really had to hand it to him. At this time, Xiao Su, Hualing, and the others just happened to slowly walk over. They could hear their conversation from afar. Master, if we enter the Zhejiang region from here, we only need to cross the Sevenly Mountain and walk straight for 3 days. Hualing held a map and pointed at a place as he spoke. Xiao Su lowered his head to look at the map and ordered, no need to take a shortcut. Cross the Sevenly Mountain and enter the first city. Hualing was a little confused. Master, if we enter the first city, we have to take this official road. Then it will take an extra day of travel. This doesn't seem right. Just follow the orders. Xiao Su lightly said, rejecting his subordinate's opinion. Hualing scratched his head. He felt that there was something wrong with his master this time, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Since his master wanted to take a detour, then they'll take a detour. His Majesty didn't insist that they rush to the Fuli mountain range anyways. Then Master, do you have any other orders? Hualing asked. Who is managing the city we're entering? Xiao Su sat down on a chair. Huang Yi and the others had already served the dishes, arranged the bowls and chopsticks, and then retreated. Hualing seriously looked at the map, then replied, the prefect is Lu Ying. He manages the 3 prefectures and 7 counties. Pingyang City is the main city, and it's also the first city we're entering. This prince wants the information on his management of the 3 prefectures and 7 counties in recent years. Xiao Su said calmly. Hualing immediately agreed. Chu Qingyan, who was eating at the side, didn't understand. They could save time, so why did the big ice block want to take a detour? Could it be that he had other plans? Lu Ying, this name is so familiar. The Emperor Emeritus, who was eating in big mouthfuls, suddenly spoke. Xiao Su turned to look at him, and his tone seemed to carry a bit of a sigh. He's the 18th generation of the imperial family's side branch. The Emperor Emeritus coughed lightly when he heard this. This prince hasn't been in charge for many years, so I don't remember clearly. Xiao Su said faintly, 2 years ago, when you passed by the district under Lu Ying's control, you even stayed in his residence for half a month. The Emperor Emeritus immediately buried his head in his food, as the saying goes, don't talk when eating. Chu Qingyan's head was full of black lines. The Emperor Emeritus was a classic example of forgetting after eating, we'll set off. Xiao Su ordered. Everyone accepted the order. In less than 2 hours, the information on the areas under Lu Ying's management in recent years was placed on Xiao Su's table. In the carriage, Xiao Su flipped through the stack of information that was half a person's height, page by page. Chu Qingyan noticed that his expression was getting darker and darker. She couldn't help but purse her lips. Why did the big ice block put aside his official business and investigate this Lu Ying first? Once they left the capital, she felt that the big ice block was acting strangely. Chapter 181. Chu Qingyan held her chin and thought back to the knowledge she had read in books before. At that time, her teacher had told them that the governor was the highest-ranking official in the country. Other than governing the people, promoting the virtuous, deciding the lawsuits, and investigating the traitors, he could also appoint and dismiss the scribes. That was equivalent to the current high-ranking officials and mayors. However, the ancient counties were much smaller than the modern ones, so there was no comparison at all. However, this position was already not small in the ancient times. At this time, a gust of wind blew in and the paper on the little bed fell to her feet. She picked it up and inadvertently saw the words written on it. 3 years ago, Lu Ying's Qi County had a flood. The court had allocated 3 million taels of silver, but in the end, the citizens of Qi County only received 300,000 taels. The other 2,700,000 taels were a mystery. In the flood disaster, 172 people died and 110 of them died from starvation. Chu Qingyan looked at the information written on the paper with wide eyes. No wonder Ice Block Yu's face was so bad. With the several million taels of relief money being a mystery, there was a certain meaning to it. Corruption. In this world, there was no business that wasn't corrupt and no official that wasn't corrupt. This had already become the common saying of the citizens. Was that ice block going to take care of it? She silently put the paper back. She had never doubted the ice block's abilities, so she just needed to follow him. No matter what he did, she would support him. She originally had a bit of energy to look at the scenery outside the window, but as the carriage swayed, she began to feel drowsy. In the end, her body tilted and she fell asleep on the bed. Chu Qingyan had also redesigned the interior of the carriage. The concept of the small couch inside was the same as that of modern foldable sofas. Therefore, when she fell asleep sitting on the couch, Xiao Su, who had been paying attention to her, shook his head when he saw this. He carried her and flipped her over to the upper couch, joining it with the lower couch to form a small bed. Only then did he gently put her down. He silently stared at the sleeping face for a while. Perhaps from today onwards, it would be bumpy. There wouldn't be a soft bed to sleep on every time. Little fellow, are you ready? Are you ready to face the wind and rain with this king? The peacefully sleeping Chu Qingyan did not know that someone had been staring at her for a long time, not leaving their line of sight. Halfway through their journey, there was a sudden gust of wind and dark clouds covered the sky. Huo Ling looked at the dark sky and his heart sunk. There was no village or shop here. If there was a storm, there wouldn't be a place to hide from the rain. So the group of people rushed and arrived at the ferry port in the evening. The carriage stopped and Chu Qingyan was already awake. There was only her and she was the only person in the carriage. She wanted to get up, but when she saw the blanket was covering her body, she couldn't help revealing a smile. Who said the ice block was a cold person? Didn't he knew how to take care of time? She silently ridiculed those who slandered Big Ice Cube in her heart, then got out of the carriage. How to the internet was that time in the end? It seemed like the words on Weibo were right. When the wind came, it was time to test everyone's weight. 80 kilograms would be blown away, 90 kilograms would be lifted off the ground, 110 kilograms would be wrapped around the pole, and 130 kilograms would not be able to stand on the road. Only the heavy weight could be as stable as Mount Tai. It was a good thing the wind was not as strong as a typhoon, otherwise she would already be floating in the sky. She opened her eyes from the wind and found that she was standing at a small ferry port. She could almost see the town on the other side, but looking at the splashes created by the wind, it would be very difficult to get through the night. Her hands formed a small tent in front of her. Looking around, she saw the ice block standing by the river, as well as the retired emperor, Huo Ling, Mu Ling, Ethereal, and the others by his side. At this time, Xining walked over. Master, you're awake. Lord just told this servant not to disturb you. I've slept enough. That's right, are we going to cross the river tonight? Chu Qingyan led Xining to the people in front of her as she asked. Xining replied, just now, I heard Lord Huoling's meaning. It seems like we want to stay here for the night and cross the river tomorrow. Chu Qingyan nodded. The sky was getting darker and the wind was getting stronger. Staying for the night before setting off was a wise decision. When they approached the group of people, they heard Lve say, there is an inn 1 li away from here. We can stay there for the night. Xiao Su nodded and Huo Ling began to order the others to get on their horses and prepare to find the inn. Chu Qingyan approached Lve and asked curiously, Lve, you don't leave the house. How do you know there is an inn here? Lve smiled faintly, little Gongzi, Lve's main responsibility is to memorize all the places in our Sichuan that we can stay in. Everyone has their own specialties. This servant is only doing her job well. Outside, everyone called Chu Qingyan little Gongzi. Her identity was Xiao Su's younger cousin called Chu Yan. Of course, Chu Yan was given by Chu Qingyan herself. Originally, Xiao Su called her Xiao Yan, but when she said that, she immediately rejected it. Why did Xiao Yan sound like anti-inflammatory medicine? So she immediately changed her identity from blood brother to cousin. Chu Qingyan clicked her tongue. Sure enough, there was a saying that as long as you worked hard in one direction, you would become a great person sooner or later. LV's powerful brain capacity and memory also made her admire her. The people around Big Ice Cube were all capable people. So the group of people headed towards the only inn within 100 miles. But when they arrived at the inn, a cold wind blew from behind them. In the dilapidated room, the first inn's signboard had already lost 3 of its triangular nails. There was only 1 nail left that was unable to maintain the signboard. First inn. Xining struggled to see the words that were already covered in spider webs. Right now was not the time to care about this. The sky was already dark, and with the flashing of lightning, the rain would fall at any moment. So the group of people went in. When the people inside heard the commotion, they began to loudly shout, "Who is it? Who is it?" Chu Qingyan looked over when she heard this and saw a 30 to 40-year-old man with a body full of fat walk out. His nose was pointed to the sky, and from her angle, she could see that his chin was piled up to his neck. There was a thumb-thick gold necklace hanging from his short neck. He was simply a nouveau riche. Huoling resisted the urge to vomit and went forward to ask, "Are you the innkeeper? Our group wants to stay, do you have any rooms?" Hearing that they were staying, the fat man immediately lowered his head and swept his eyes over the people present. When he saw the people in front, they were all dressed in luxurious clothes and looked like they came from rich families. His eyes immediately lit up and his attitude changed 180 degrees. Yes, yes, yes. No matter how many people come, there are enough rooms. At this time, another voice sounded out, "Damn ghost, what happened?" The fat man immediately turned his head and replied, "Woman, the big head is here." Once he said this, he realized that he had misspoken. The fat man immediately smiled and corrected himself, "Honored guests are here." Chu Qingyan's face turned dark. "You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.